Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Many people chimed in after hearing Grina's derisive comment. Even though the magic scroll had already displayed greater power, it still wasn't a high-level gravity mageth scroll in their opinion. Besides, gravity mageths had very few functions in the first place, and they weren't very powerful either. Hence, compared to the other items at the auction, they felt that it wouldn't be wrong to call it junk. However, Grand Duke Vidi turned a deaf ear to the voices, and continued to slowly unroll the scroll. As the magic scroll was unrolled, the dense power became increasingly stronger. However, due to the defensive magic array of the auction, the people below the stage didn't feel much. Still, Grand Duke Vidi felt a little anxious when he saw the situation because it concerned the reputation of the Gilded Kingdom and Grand Duke Vidi himself. If he hadn't been afraid of causing casualties, he would have just switched off the defensive magic array and let them have a feel of the power of the magic scroll. In a moment of panic and anxiety, Grand Duke Vidi couldn't help but have his hand shake a little. If this was just any other magic scroll, a slight shake wouldn't have any impact on it, but when Grand Duke Vidi's hand trembled, he suddenly unrolled the scroll further until about a quarter of it was exposed. With that change, the power of the mageth spread out too. The people who were protected by the defensive magic array were still criticizing and condemning Grand Duke Vidi, as well as Lin Li, the owner of the magic scroll. However, they suddenly heard the sounds of a massive explosion outside that resembled the sound of the earth crumbling. Their ears began buzzing, and immediately afterwards, they were horrified to find that the faint golden magic array above their heads was covered with numerous cobweb-like cracks. At the same time, it was also emitting crackling sounds, and the array seemed to be on the verge of shattering. This time, the people below the stage were really dumbfounded. Even though it was really just a gravity mageth, it was absolutely shocking that it could contain such massive power. For the majority of them, it definitely wasn't their first time coming to the Gilded Kingdom, and thus they had quite a good understanding of the famous art exhibition hall of the Gilded Kingdom. There was a master level 8 ocean dragon god barrier laid out in the hall. When enlarged, it could envelop the entire kingdom, and when it was shrunk, it could only protect a wine glass in the room. More importantly, it had a high defensive power, and those who were at the legendary level and below would not be able to shake the barrier at all. Even an ordinary sanctuary powerhouse would have a hard time breaking it. However, even the strong and powerful 8 ocean dragon god barrier began to crack under the power of the magic scroll that everyone treated as a gravity mageth. Even though the force was blocked by the barrier, the people who were protected were still frightened to the point of turning as pale as a sheet. They didn't dare to imagine how terrifying it would be if the power that could shatter the 8 ocean dragon god barrier were to be imposed on their bodies. Perhaps even legendary powerhouses would have a hard time surviving under that force. King Bradler, who originally thought of saving Lin Li from the embarrassment by offering a decent price for the magic scroll, involuntarily let his jaw drop when he stared at the scene going on in the hall. No one knew better than him how powerful the 8 ocean dragon god barrier was. It was a powerful defensive barrier that was set up jointly by 8 sanctuary powerhouses, and it contained the characteristics of a domain world. Each of the 8 sanctuary powerhouses contributed a powerful law that they were good at, and they jointly created a barrier that had a near-perfect structure of laws. In other words, the 8 ocean dragon god barrier was equivalent to a solidified sanctuary-level domain world in essence. Although that didn't mean that the power of the 8 ocean dragon god barrier was equivalent to the sum of the power of the 8 sanctuary powerhouses, it was definitely more powerful than the individual domain worlds of each sanctuary powerhouse. During the rebellion that had once occurred in the Gilded Kingdom, the Ocean Dragon family, which was one of the ancient families, tried to blast Hupper City, the capital of Gilded Kingdom, but they could not conquer it in the end. The most important reason behind their failure was the existence of the 8 ocean dragon god barrier. During that rebellion, the Ocean Dragon family had resorted to various methods, but they still couldn't cause the slightest damage to the 8 ocean dragon god barrier. Eventually, they were suppressed by the royal family of the Gilded Kingdom. Even the corpse of the ancient evil dragon, which possessed terrifying power, that was near the divine realm, could not do much damage during the great calamity that it had created for the Gilded Kingdom, because of the 8 ocean dragon god barrier that kept the Gilded Kingdom safe. Although the corpse of the ancient dragon did not deliberately try to attack Hupper City, it did not let go of this place easily. The 8 ocean dragon god barrier had played a significant role in saving Hupper City from destruction during the disaster. However, the gravity mageth that everyone thought was just a piece of garbage actually emitted such a terrifying power that could cause the 8 ocean dragon god barrier to crack. In that case, could that magic scroll still be considered a piece of garbage? At the very least, it was definitely considered an extremely powerful magical weapon even if it was still a gravity mageth. Did President Flick really draw that mageth? Bradler immediately asked Monterey in huge disbelief, after finally recovering from the shock. Although he seemed to be asking Prince Monterey about it, he was actually asking himself that question. If he didn't care about his identity, he would give himself a tight slap to see if he was still dreaming. At this moment, Prince Monterey was actually just as shocked as Bradler. Even though he had interacted with Lin Li far less frequently than Bradler did, the simple truth was that Lin Li was a magic prodigy who had reached the sanctuary realm in his early 20s. Hence, Bradler felt that it was impossible for him to still have the time and energy to have such amazing attainments in the field of inscription. Of course, Bradler and Monterey did not know that Lin Li not only had such impressive attainments in the field of inscription, but also master-level attainments in the field of alchemy, pharmaceutics, forging, and so on. If they were to find out about it, both of them would probably go mad. After all, it required a ton of time and lifelong effort to make such great attainments in those fields. Besides, the vast majority of people might not be able to have such attainments even if they committed a lifetime's worth of time and effort to studying. The minority who could have such remarkable achievements would be considered geniuses in their respective fields, just like Harquis, the prince of the Octopus clan, Wilkinson, the genius pharmacist of the Pharmacist Guild, and so on. On the other hand, Lin Li was like the epitome of a genius in all fields. If others were to discover his attainments, he would probably be treated as the reincarnation of a deity. I reckon so. There's no need for President Flick to lie to us about this. That was the only way Monterey could answer Bradler's question. Of course, he wasn't giving a baseless answer. After all, after interacting with Lin Li a few times, he could tell that Lin Li wasn't after fame and fortune. Hence, the latter wouldn't do such a despicable thing as to pass off other people's works as his own. At this moment, Grina, who was inciting the crowd to denounce Grand Duke Viti, couldn't help but look a little more solemn. Even though the power exhibited by that magic scroll was not enough to make him feel shocked, he could from the massive power alone that it was clearly inappropriate to call it garbage. There were numerous treasures and magical weapons that could exert such power in the Giant Shark Clan's treasure vault, but the issue was that most of those things were obtained by the Giant Shark Clan during the fall of the Ocean Dynasty. It was impossible for them to produce such an item. Yet, Lin Li had created that magic scroll in front of them. Since he could create one, he could definitely create even more. In other words, the things that they treated as treasures could be created in bulk by Lin Li as he pleased. That was undoubtedly making the value of the treasures in Grina's collection depreciate, thus making Grina feel extremely bothered. If this magic scroll that he had just called a piece of junk was really one, what would the treasures in his collection be considered? In fact, the 4 divine generals that had come here together with Grina were already rather tempted by the magic scroll. If it weren't for the way Grina behaved just now, and the feud between them and the Tower of Dusk, they would have probably persuaded Grina to buy the mageth. Although the Giant Shark Clan's 4 divine generals were at the Sanctuary Realm, they couldn't create their own domain world. Hence, in their eyes, this magic scroll which could exert such massive power was the best thing that could make up for their shortcomings. Of course, even now, they still thought that the magic scroll was just a relatively ordinary gravity mageth scroll, except that it was much more powerful than the majority of gravity mageths. However, it was precisely because they decided that it was a gravity mageth scroll that they coveted it a little. If a sanctuary level warrior, who was already powerful enough, had the enhancement of such an incredible mageth that could almost contend with the gravity domain, they would probably become the nightmare of any enemy. Unfortunately, the magic scroll was created by President Flick of the Tower of Dusk, and given Grina's personality, he definitely wouldn't spend any money on it. The 4 divine generals might be sanctuary powerhouses, but Grina was ultimately the prince of the Giant Shark Clan, and they couldn't disregard him. Grand Duke Viti, who was standing on the stage to showcase the magic scroll, was also stunned by the power of the mageth at first, and even wanted to quickly roll up the scroll a little. However, he soon saw the expressions of the people below the stage, and immediately changed his mind. You people were mocking me just now. I shall let you see the true power of this magic scroll. Things have developed to the point that Grand Duke Viti completely forgot that his previous attitude towards the magic scroll was actually no different from that of the audience below. He merely brought the scroll to the stage and introduced it to the audience because it was part of his duty as the host. However, Grand Duke Viti was a human with feelings too, and it was impossible for him not to have felt even a tinge of anger. If the magic scroll was really a piece of garbage, he could only admit that he was unlucky. But now that the magic scroll displayed extraordinary power, it gave him hope in regaining his pride, so he naturally refused to give up just like that. Hence, Grand Duke Viti, who was holding the scroll, took a deep breath and got a grip on his emotions. But he didn't stop just like that. He grabbed the magic scroll tightly in his hands and continued to slowly unroll the magic scroll to display its power to the audience below the stage. As the magic scroll was unrolled further, the power that surged out became increasingly powerful, and it filled the entire hall with crackling sounds. Although it was blocked by the 8-ocean dragon god barrier, everyone noticed that the ground beneath their feet seemed to be slowly sinking under that heavy pressure. The light of the magic defense also began to flicker under the heavy pressure, while the flow of mana, in the surrounding pillars of golden light, that released the defensive power was clearly increasing rapidly. It seemed to be reaching the limit of its tolerance. Although the power of the magic scroll did not land directly on the body of any individual, everyone present felt extremely oppressed as everything around them seemed to be suffocating. They felt as if the sky was about to collapse and as if their soul was about to be crushed by the great pressure. Even the bigwigs in the private rooms upstairs couldn't help but look sullen. The 4 divine generals around Grina immediately intervened and formed a defensive barrier that shrouded the entire private room using their combat energy. Although they didn't think that the power of the magic scroll could breach the defense of the 8-ocean dragon god barrier, they still had to protect Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan. Well, the scene in several private rooms was similar to that in the giant shark clan's private room. Be it sanctuary powerhouses or legendary powerhouses, they were all putting their defensive measures to use. It wasn't that they were being timid and cowardly, but rather everyone there was powerful and noble. If something were to happen to them, it would be too late to regret it, so it was better to make preparations in advance. However, Harquis wasn't doing anything in the private room of the Octopus clan at the moment, and was merely keeping his eyes fixed on the magic scroll that Grand Duke Viti was holding. As Grand Duke Viti further unrolled the magic scroll, the Mageth on it was revealed. Although there wasn't a full view of it yet, the mystery of it could already be seen. Although others could not tell anything from the Mageth, Harquis was a newly minted master of inscription who was also from the Octopus clan, which had a strong foundation and rich heritage in inscription. Even though he couldn't understand the mysteries contained in the Mageth, he could also tell that it definitely wasn't a simple gravity Mageth, as it had, in fact, transcended the common theory of the field of inscription in many aspects. However, when Harquis wanted to study it carefully, he suddenly thought of his Mageth that had been stained with ink and gave off an alluring power that made him suffer a ton back then. The thought of it made him dispel his idea immediately as he called one of the subordinates behind him to immediately go back and invite his father, or any of the elders here. Although Harquis did not have a good impression of Lin Li, he remembered the admonishments that his father and the Grand Elder had given him previously. At this moment, he naturally didn't dare to act presumptuously when faced with the Mageth Lin Li had created. Hence, regardless of the quality of the magic scroll, and whether it was authentic or not, Harquis thought that it would be better to wait for his father and the Grand Elder to come over before making a decision. The magic scroll in Grand Duke Viti's hand was already almost halfway unrolled, and everyone could see clearly that the 8-ocean dragon god barrier had begun showing signs of crumbling under the suppression of an invisible force. Despite refusing to believe it, the people couldn't stop themselves from developing terrifying thoughts. They reckoned that maybe the 8-ocean dragon god barrier would really crumble once the magic scroll was completely unrolled. However, Grand Duke Viti did not stop what he was doing. In fact, he even seemed somewhat maniacal. No one would be able to remain collected and composed when holding an item that possessed such a terrifying force. Grand Duke Viti even felt an impulse to pocket the scroll instead of putting it up for auction. In fact, simply put, Grand Duke Viti was enthralled because he had never been in control of such a massive power before. However, at this moment, King Bradler suddenly stood in front of the window of the private room and yelled at the people below, "Grand Duke Viti, stop, we'd better start the auction formally." Bradler had no other choice. If this went on, the crumbling magic defense in the hall might really be crushed and destroyed. The destruction was not what he was worried about. If anything happened to the guests here, the Gilded Kingdom would definitely be in trouble. Although there were very few guests who could contend with the Gilded Kingdom, the kingdom's reputation would still be greatly affected even if an insignificant nobody was to get injured here. Grand Duke Viti finally snapped back to his senses after hearing Bradler's words, and remembered where he was now. After sobering up, Grand Duke Viti looked at the magic defense that was crumbling because of the oppressive Mageth, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly rolled up the magic scroll. When the magic scroll was put away, the terrifying power, too, vanished without a trace, while the stimulated 8-ocean dragon god barrier naturally began to converge again. Once everything was calm again and peace was restored, Grand Duke Viti cleared his throat, raised the magic scroll in his hand, and said, "Everyone, You should have witnessed the power of this magic scroll just now. The auction for this scroll will officially begin now with a starting bid of 5 million gold coins. If Grand Duke Viti had said at the beginning that the minimum bid price of the magic scroll was 5 million gold coins, he would have definitely been mocked and slammed by the crowd. However, now that they had experienced what just happened, everyone in the auction hall stayed silent after hearing Grand Duke Viti's words. No one stood out to question the price, either. Even Grina, who hated Lin Li to the core, and wished he could make the scroll go unsold to put Lin Li to shame, couldn't bring himself to offer a price of a few gold coins at this time. If he continued to do that again, he'd be the one getting embarrassed. Wait, Grand Duke Viti, before the bidding starts, can you tell us the name of this magic scroll? Harquis was a bit anxious when he saw that Grand Duke Viti was about to announce the start of the auction, and thus decided to ask the question in order to buy some time. After all, his father and the elders had yet to arrive, and he couldn't make a good judgment or evaluation of the scroll. Of course, Harquis asked a very reasonable question, because every item had a name, regardless of what it was. Since it was a magic scroll, the audience had the right to know what it was called and what the name of the Magath on it was, as well as its level. The so-called mystery auction items were only kept confidential just before the start of the auction. When the auction was about to begin, the information regarding the item would definitely be told to the crowd in all clarity. Hence, the people who had previously treated the roll as a piece of junk began clamoring at Grand Duke Viti at this moment as they demanded a proper introduction of the scroll from him. Even though they might not be willing to spend money to buy such a magic scroll, they were still curious out of human nature. However, Grand Duke Viti was stumped by the question. He had previously called it a mysterious auction item, precisely because he wanted to avoid having to give them an explanation. If he said that they couldn't even identify the level of the magic scroll, the reputation of his auctions would be severely tarnished. Grand Duke Viti hesitated and thought about the power that this magic scroll had just exerted before biting the bullet, and saying, "This magic scroll is called Mount Tai, which is derived from the meaning of Titan Holy Mountain. It is a masterpiece that definitely isn't inferior to most guru-level creations. More information will be revealed to the person who wins the auction of this item by President Falik of the Tower of Dusk, whom you may approach to find out more. I shall not go further into detail about this item for now." The magic scroll was named Mount Tai. That was the only information about it that had been revealed, but Grand Duke Viti, too, could not figure out which mountain it referred to. However, in order to make the item fetch a better price, he decided to just mention the Titan Holy Mountain. As for the level of the magic scroll, the auctioneers had consulted many inscribers, but none of them could identify it. Hence, Grand Duke Viti simply said that it was a master-level Magath one, which he thought would be apt, considering Lin Li's young age. In Grand Duke Viti's opinion, having master-level attainments and inscription at Lin Li's age was already unbelievable enough, and he didn't think that Lin Li would be able to become a guru of inscription. In Anral, gurus of inscription were few and far between. Even the Octopus clan, that was naturally highly talented in inscription, had very few gurus of inscription. In the field of inscription, a guru of inscription was the equivalent of a sanctuary powerhouse, or even an existence that was closer to the gods than sanctuary powerhouses. Grand Duke Viti didn't believe that Lin Li could have the same level of attainment in the field of inscription, even though he had reached the sanctuary realm in magic. However, Harquis was a bit skeptical about Grand Duke Viti's explanation because he still remembered clearly Grand Elder Hay's evaluation of the stained Magath that earned the awe and respect of the elders of the Octopus clan, even though all Lin Li did was spill a bottle of ink onto it. In that case, Harquis thought that it was impossible for a Magath drawn by Lin Li to be only at the master level. However, Harquis thought for a second, and guessed the reason that Grand Duke Viti said that. Since the Magath had been drawn by someone whom even Grand Elder Hayes had spoken highly of, ordinary inscribers obviously wouldn't be able to identify its level. Not to mention the human inscribers, there were probably very few or even none who could accurately identify the Magath even in the Octopus clan. 10 million gold coins, exclaimed Bradler. He had been waiting for Grand Duke Viti to announce the start of the auctioning of the scroll for a long time. Hence, he immediately placed his bid. He initially thought of buying it at a decent price to do Lin Li a favor, but after seeing the power of that magic scroll, he developed a strong desire to acquire it. If he could buy a magic scroll that could shake the 8-ocean dragon god barrier with just 10 million gold coins, it would be akin to finding a treasure without much effort. However, Bradler knew that it probably wouldn't be possible for him to acquire the magic scroll easily now that everyone had seen its power during the showcase just now. As expected, as soon as Bradler placed his bid, another 4 or 5 people did so too, and the bid price was raised to more than 20 million gold coins, in the blink of an eye. That was just the price offered by the people on the first floor, and those of the more powerful forces, in the private rooms of the second floor, had yet to place their bids. Among the people present, Grina of the Giant Shark clan was probably the one with the strongest financial power. In order to compete for the heart of all evil, he'd even agreed to exchange the mineral mining rights for the funds of the Sea Serpent clan. Although they did not manage to win the auction for the heart of all evil in the end, the deal between him and the Sea Serpent clan was still valid. Hence, he didn't return the funds to the Sea Serpent clan. However, how could Grina be willing to spend a large amount of money on something created by his enemy, even if it was a guru-level magic scroll? He wouldn't be willing to fork out a single gold coin for it, not to mention when it was a master-level one. Hence, Grina was excluded from the list of competitors. At this juncture, Queen Halia and Prince Cleve of the Siren Queen looked somewhat regretful, for they had already invested all the funds they had prepared, coupled with the financial support from Lin Li, to acquire the heart of all evil. Although they were also interested in that magic scroll, they didn't have the means to acquire it. I didn't expect President Flick to have such a high attainment in the field of inscription too. He's really unpredictable, Queen Halia exclaimed emotionally as she looked at the scene below. Yeah, I'm afraid Grina has offended someone he shouldn't have, and formed a feud with the wrong person for the Giant Shark clan. Prince Cleve also nodded in agreement. Suddenly reminded of something, he said, since President Flick has such high attainments in inscription, I wonder if he can draw a powerful mageth for the heart of all evil. Although the heart of all evil contained a very powerful force, the use of it alone would not allow much power to be exerted, so there had to be a mageth to match it in order to stimulate and control its power. Prince Cleve had initially intended for the Octopus clan's elders to help draw a mageth to complement the heart of all evil. However, although the Octopus clan and Siren clan were on good terms with each other, they were still competing forces of the Endless Ocean, and weren't exactly extremely close. Hence, they weren't sure if the Octopus clan would help. Unlike them, Lin Li's Tower of Dusk was not a force that belonged to the Endless Ocean, and thus would not have a conflict of interests with the Siren clan. Besides, Prince Cleve had also managed to get closer to Lin Li when he approached Lin Li for help previously. In fact, forging closer relations was not just about giving each other benefits. Asking for help and making some deals was also one of the ways to become closer to someone else. People tended to get closer with increased interactions, and sometimes offending the other party to a small extent might also become an opportunity to deepen the ties between both parties. Prince Cleve had not known that Lin Li had such high attainments in inscription in the beginning, but now that he had seen how powerful the magic scroll was, he immediately thought of asking Lin Li to help draw the complementary mageth for the heart of all evil. Of course, he would give Lin Li something in return for his effort. Since Lin Li needed the Siren's tears, they could give them to him as a form of remuneration. Okay, Queen Halia nodded elegantly, and took her eyes off the scroll to turn to look at Prince Cleve, who was beside her. She said, after the auction is over, go contact President Flick again. During Queen Halia and Prince Cleve's conversation, the price of the magic scroll Lin Li had created was already pushed to 50 million gold coins by the crowd. Such a high amount could be considered the limit of the price that a magic scroll, at the peak of the master level, could fetch. As long as it was still below the guru level, the final transacted price shouldn't be too far off from 50 million gold coins. The person who placed the bid of 53 million gold coins, which was the highest bid so far, was Harquis of the Octopus clan. However, even so, Harquis still seemed a little anxious because his father and elders had yet to arrive. Hence, he could not tell if the magic scroll was worth a higher price, and didn't know if he should continue to compete for it if there were higher bids for it. Unfortunately, things did not always go according to one's wishes. Just as Harquis was being worried that someone would offer a higher price, he heard a new offer coming from someone in another private room. 55 million gold coins. The person who placed that bid was Manson, the prodigy of the Thunder Eel clan. Although he did not have much knowledge of inscriptions, he was obviously interested in the great power displayed by the magic scroll, just as anyone would be. Besides, Manson and Harquis weren't on good terms in the first place. Thus, when Manson saw that Harquis was interested in the magic scroll, he naturally had to make things hard for Harquis. Of course, Harquis and Manson weren't the only ones who were interested in the magic scroll that Lin Li had put up for auction. King Bradler of the Gilded Kingdom wanted to keep the scroll for himself too. Hence, he immediately placed his bid as well. 60 million gold coins. Bradler didn't take part in the bidding for the sake of doing Lin Li a favor, but because he had been enticed by the power of the magic scroll. Others were interested in the magic scroll, because the power it contained could shake even the 8-ocean dragon god barrier, while Bradler was keen on acquiring it because he knew exactly how powerful the defensive powers of the 8-ocean dragon god barrier was. Based on the scene just now, Bradler could deduce the level of power the magic scroll had exerted. Although the magic scroll had not been fully unrolled, Bradler was certain that the power that it exerted was definitely enough to crush a mountain, submerge a fleet of alchemical battleships, and sink an entire island to the bottom of the sea. The magic scroll was definitely a great war weapon that was powerful enough to replace a fleet of alchemical battleships, and building a fleet of alchemical battleships would cost far more than 60 million gold coins. How could Bradler be willing to miss such a powerful weapon? After a few rounds of bidding, the price of the magic scroll had already exceeded 80 million gold coins, which was naturally peanuts compared to the price of the heart of all evil. However, it was considered extremely expensive for a master-level magic scroll. After all, although this magic scroll was rare, there seemed to only be one function to it, and it was far from comparable to the heart of all evil that could suppress a sacred land. Seeing that the price had exceeded 80 million gold coins, Harquis, who was in the private room, began to panic. He wanted to offer a higher bid, but he didn't know if the magic scroll was worth a higher price or not. However, if he chose not to do so, and ended up missing out on a good item, it would cause him to be reprimanded by his father and elders. When Harquis was caught in a dilemma, the door of the private room suddenly opened. Immediately afterwards, Great Monarch Hegel and Grand Elder Hayes strode in from outside. "Father, Grand Elder," Harquis hurriedly greeted as he went forward to salute his father and Grand Elder gleefully. After both of them were seated, he told them about the auction of Lin Li's magic scroll. For the past few days, Hegel and Hayes had been studying the Magath stone slab that Harquis had brought back. Ultimately, the base of that Magath was Harquis' creation, and it had become a high-level Magath with the enhancement of some additional material. Hence, it was extremely difficult to find the laws within. Therefore, when Hegel and Hayes heard that a magic scroll that Lin Li had drawn was put up for auction, Hegel and Hayes immediately rushed over to take a look. Although Grand Duke Viti had rolled up the magic scroll, Hegel and Hayes had already gained some understanding of the magic scroll after hearing Harquis' description. At this moment, Grand Duke Viti had already begun asking if there were any higher bidders, according to the rules of the auction. When Hegel and Hayes heard that the price had exceeded 90 million gold coins, they looked at each other before saying to Harquis, "Let's buy it, regardless of how much it costs." Others valued the magic scroll because of the power it possessed, but for a master of inscription like Hegel, the real value of Lin Li's magic scroll lay in the inscription knowledge that it contained. In the Magath of the stone slab that they looked at previously, they saw a trace of the power belonging to the divine smith level. Hence, the magic scroll was much more valuable to them than to the others, 100 million gold coins. The bid coming from the private room of the Octopus clan immediately made the guests in the auction hall fall silent. Many people raised their heads and turned to look at the private rooms on the second floor. It was an extremely unbelievable price, although they knew that what they had just seen was only a portion of the power contained in the magic scroll. They still didn't think that it was worth 100 million gold coins. They couldn't figure out why the Octopus clan, which had unparalleled attainments in the field of inscription, would offer 100 million gold coins. Everyone knew that the Octopus clan was highly talented in the field of inscription, as they not only had many masters of inscription, they were also presided over by Grand Elder Hayes, who was a guru of inscription. Given the Octopus clan's abilities, there wasn't a need for them to spend so much money on a magic scroll that was at the peak of the master level. Of course, there were some smart people who figured out that the magic scroll definitely wasn't as simple as it seemed to be on the surface based on the Octopus clan's actions. However, they were well aware that they probably wouldn't be able to get anything from the magic scroll even if they paid such a huge price to acquire it. After all, not everyone had the same attainments in inscription as the Octopus clan. After hearing the price of 100 million gold coins, Greena of the Giant Shark clan couldn't quite believe his ears. He thought, isn't it just an ordinary gravity Magath? How can it be worth 100 million gold coins? Greena, could it be that there is really something special about Felic's magic scroll? Should we? Zoro, one of the 4 divine generals, asked with some hesitation. In terms of financial power, there was probably no one who could compare to the Giant Shark clan in the entire auction house. Hence, if there was really something impressive about the magic scroll, the Giant Shark clan would definitely be confident in clinching it. However, Greena was not a generous person, not to mention that the item belonged to his enemy. The sheer price of 100 million gold coins was already making him feel extremely frustrated. After hearing Zoro's words, he waved his hand and furiously hollered, "Forget it, I bet the Octopus clan are in cahoots with him. It's just a magic scroll. How can it be worth such a high price? Do they take us for fools? Grina didn't want to believe that one of Lin Li's magic scrolls could really be worth that much money, and he naturally thought of another possibility. Perhaps the Octopus clan is just pretending to bid to deliberately push the price higher so as to fool those who don't know much about maggoths. Despite disagreeing with Grina, Zoro and his peers didn't dare to say anything else. Even though the four divine generals were sanctuary powerhouses, they were subordinate to the prince of the giant shark clan, and everyone knew that Grina was the future helmsman of the giant shark clan. Hence, they wouldn't try to offend him. The price of 100 million gold coins for a master-level magic scroll was already far beyond what it was worth. As opposed to fixed maggoths that were carved on certain spots, magic scrolls might be portable, but the power was greatly inferior to that of a fixed maggoth because fixed maggoths would often have a special mana source, while magic scrolls could only rely on the mana that was infused during the drawing process. Hence, its power was naturally far inferior. Hence, after the Octopus clan placed a bid of 100 million gold coins, everyone in the hall fell silent, and those who'd wanted to acquire the magic scroll at first had no choice but to reconsider carefully. 100 million gold coins. Seems like there are still people here who know their stuff. The price of your magic scroll has actually reached 100 million gold coins, Connor said with a straight face, not at all surprised by how high the price had risen. On the other hand, there wasn't a single trace of joy on Lin Li's face as he remained composed and asked, 100 million gold coins. The Octopus clan has saved a ton of money. If the people outside heard Lin Li's words, they would probably be agitated to the point of vomiting blood. There were many other things they could do with 100 million gold coins, such as buying a large island or building a powerful fleet. However, the Octopus clan chose to spend it on a magic scroll, and yet Lin Li still said that they had saved a ton of money. However, that was only based on the fact that it was a master-level maggoth, according to Grand Duke Viti. If it was really only at the peak of the master level, 100 million gold coins would definitely be called a sky-high price. Even if masters of inscription and master-level maggoths were rare, 100 million gold coins was enough to hire a master of inscription. However, those who knew nothing about inscriptions didn't know what level the magic scroll named Mount Tai should be, nor did the Octopus clan. Only Lin Li, the person who'd created it with his own hands, knew the value of the magic scroll. Maggoths below the master level could be described as a manifestation of the usage of laws, while master-level maggoths involve the manipulation and control of laws. For example, if the wind was considered laws, raising the sails of a ship to drive it forward would be the use of laws. If there was no wind that day, but a person could create wind to drive the ship forward, what the person did would be considered the manipulation of laws. When one reached the divine smith level, which was above the guru level, they would have reached the realm of law creation and broken free from the dependence on the laws of this world. Just like a powerhouse at the divine realm, they wouldn't be bound by the laws of the world, and a single word or thought of theirs could allow them to create laws as they wished. One of the reasons that Lin Li named the maggoth Mount Tai was, of course, his nostalgia and sentiments for his hometown. However, it was also because Mount Tai was non-existent in this world, which also meant that the laws used in the maggoth did not belong to Anral. They were laws that belonged to Lin Li, and were involved with the divine smith realm. Of course, Lin Li was still far from reaching the divine smith level, hence, the laws he created weren't extremely powerful. However, even then, the power contained in the Mount Tai magic scroll was not comparable to the power of an ordinary sanctuary-level maggoth. If the Mount Tai magic scroll was completely unrolled, the capital of the Gilded Kingdom would probably be destroyed. If the fact that the magic scroll was near the divine smith level and contained the laws that Lin Li had created was revealed, the people would probably fight for it at all costs, even if the price went up to 1 billion gold coins, let alone 100 million gold coins. However, Grand Duke Viti had now mistaken it for a peak master level maggoth, which naturally made it seem a lot less attractive to others. The Octopus clan would definitely get the better end of the deal if they bought it at just 100 million gold coins. Bradler originally planned to give up. After all, a peak master level maggoth was not rare in the Gilded Kingdom. However, after hearing the Octopus clan's offer of 100 million gold coins, he couldn't help but be tempted. If even the Octopus clan, that was extremely talented in inscription, was so interested in the maggoth, it probably wasn't as simple as it seemed to be on the surface. Bradler did not suspect that the Octopus clan would pretend to bid for Lin Li. Only someone like Grina would project his shortcomings on others. Hence, when Bradler saw that Grand Duke Viti was about to ask for the third time, he raised his bidder sign and exclaimed, 120,000 gold coins. 120 million gold coins. Manson of the Thunder Eel clan could not help but frown after hearing the price, which was far beyond his evaluation of the scroll. After hesitating for a moment, Manson put down the sign in his hand and gave up on bidding. With 120 million gold coins, he could buy an epic level staff or other powerful magic equipment that could allow him to increase his personal strength. That would be far better than having a scroll with a single function. And hearing this price, Harquis, who was in the private room of the Octopus clan, couldn't help but hesitate too. He turned to look at his father and the Grand Elder. Even for the wealthy Octopus clan, 120 million gold coins was still a considerable sum of money, and if the Magath turned out to be different from their expectations, they would have wasted their money. However, Hegel, the great monarch of the Octopus clan, glared at him and hollered, "Continue to bid for it. Did you forget what I just said? If we don't get our hands on this magic scroll, I'll teach you a lesson when we go back." Taken aback, Harquis cringed in horror and quickly raised the bidder sign in his hand as he yelled, 130 million gold coins. According to what Grand Duke Viti had just said, the minimum bid increment for this item was 1 million gold coins. Hence, in Harquis' opinion, an increment of 10 million gold coins at once was already very high and would stop him from suffering major losses. However, his action aroused the displeasure of Hegel, who glowered at him again. 140 million gold coins. Bradler had already made up his mind to buy the magic scroll. Anyway, the power of the scroll alone was equivalent to that of a large fleet of alchemical battleships. Even if the Magath wasn't as mystical and full of secrets as he had thought, he definitely wouldn't make a loss. However, this scene was baffling for those people in the hall because Grand Duke Viti had already said that it was a master-level magic scroll that could probably be bought with just 10 million gold coins, yet the current bid price had exceeded 100 million, which got the people wondering if the big shots were out of their minds. All of a sudden, the hall was filled with the sounds of various discussions, and some even connected Bradler's behavior to the embarrassing incidents that happened to the Gilded Kingdom previously. Thinking that the Gilded Kingdom was again trying to curry favor with Fulik, the president of the Tower of Dusk. Of course, their speculation was right, but only pertaining to Bradler's initial behavior and intentions. Now, Bradler was completely enthralled by the power of the magic scroll. Even though he did not have a deep understanding of the scroll, he wasn't worried that he might be spending too much on something inferior, because the Octopus clan was also vying for the magic scroll. However, it was not an easy thing to snatch the magic scroll from the Octopus clan. In terms of financial power and resources, the Gilded Kingdom was definitely far ahead of any other sea clan. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had a foothold in the endless ocean. However, compared to the sea clans, Bradler had many more concerns. Strictly speaking, the Gilded Kingdom did not belong to him alone, nor did it entirely belong to the royals of the kingdom. For example, the senatorial families in the kingdom also held significant status and authority that would allow them to overthrow the royals if they joined forces. Hence, if Bradler wanted to spend a large sum of money on the scroll, he could either take the money out of the royals' treasury, or hold a debate with the senatorial families and ministers to decide whether or not to dip into the financial reserves of the kingdom. Not to mention whether the ministers would agree to use the kingdom's money. The fact that it was an auction meant that there was no time for them to hold a parliamentary debate before coming to a decision. Hence, Bradler could only use the money from the treasury of the royals. On the other hand, it was different from the sea clans. Although the sea clans also had councils consisting of elders, they were mainly involved only when the matter concerned the survival of the sea clan. Otherwise, the great monarch of the sea clan would usually call the shots and have the final say. For the sea clans, the royals did not have a treasury separate from the national treasury, so they could spend money without as many scruples and concerns as Bradler did. 160 million gold coins. The Octopus clan offered a new price, raising it by another 20 million gold coins. Besides, before Bradler could respond, the Jellyfish clan, which hadn't participated in the bidding at the beginning, placed a bid of 180 million gold coins. The Jellyfish clan were known for their forte in pharmaceutics, and could be considered the pharmacists of the sea clans. Running a lucrative business in the pharmaceutics industry, the Jellyfish clan was definitely not inferior to the Octopus clan in terms of financial power. The bidding for the magic scroll had initially already reached the cooldown period. Yet, the Jellyfish clan suddenly intervened and joined the bidding too. However, that was not the end. After the Jellyfish clan placed their bid, a merchant who was said to be representing the mysterious Eastern continent also joined the bidding. In the blink of an eye, the price of the magic scroll exceeded the benchmark of 200 million gold coins. In the opinion of the crowd at the beginning, the magic scroll was just an item that had only one function, so regardless of how rare it might be, they all thought that it would never exceed the price of the heart of all evil no matter how high it was pushed to. However, it now seemed that although there was still quite a large gap between the current bid for the magic scroll and the final transacted price of the heart of all evil. The momentum of the price increase was not to be belittled. However, when the bidding price was pushed all the way to a price point that was nearing the 300 million gold coin mark, the bidding began to come to a halt. Bradler had already given up on bidding for it, because 300 million gold coins was beyond what he could afford, and there was no time to hold a discussion with the kingdom to decide if they could use the funds of the national treasury. After a long hesitation, the merchant from the eastern continent also no longer raised his bidder sign, because he felt that the magic scroll was not worth his entire budget regardless of how powerful it might be. The only remaining contenders were the Jellyfish clan and the Octopus clan, both of which were whales of the sea clans. However, they, too, began to hesitate a little when they saw how exaggeratedly high the price had soared. At this point, it was almost time for the final winner of the auction to be decided. Besides, the price of nearly 300 million gold coins might be a little lower than the final transacted price of the heart of all evil, but it was definitely considered a remarkable record in the history of auctions. As the host of the auction this time, Grand Duke Viti should by right be very satisfied to have auctioned off the magic scroll and the heart of all evil at record-breaking prices. However, when Grand Duke Viti saw that the bidding had somewhat come to a standstill, he developed a crazy thought. Why can't the transaction price of this magic scroll be higher than that of the heart of all evil? Everyone knew that the power of the magic scroll that he had shown them just now was far from the maximum power of the magic scroll. In that case, how massive must its full power be, they wondered. Although there was an appraisal report of the magic scroll on the table, the maximum power of the scroll was not stated on the report. The only information about the power was that it would be increased geometrically as it was unrolled further. Hence, Grand Duke Viti wanted to take advantage of the 8-ocean dragon god barrier to let the people at the auction see just how powerful the magic scroll was and gauge for themselves whether it was worth 300 million gold coins. In fact, at the end of the day, it was all because Grand Duke Viti hadn't been able to vent his anger. No one would be able to stomach getting humiliated and taunted, and take it as if nothing had happened. Not to mention, Grand Duke Viti was a noble who had always been respected by everyone. At this moment, the Octopus clan's bid had already reached 290 million gold coins, and the Jellyfish clan seemed to be showing signs of giving up. However, Grand Duke Viti did not follow the usual practice of asking if there were any higher bidders. Instead, he picked up the magic scroll and said to the crowd, "Everyone, I might have shown you some of the power of the magic scroll, but I believe many of you still think that it's not as functional as the heart of all evil, and isn't worth as much as the heart of all evil. Therefore, I hope that I can have the chance to show all of you the full power of the magic scroll, so that you may evaluate its actual value." Of course, Grand Duke Viti did not do that purely to vent his anger. On the one hand, he was feeling very curious about the power of the magic scroll, but if he auctioned it off now, it would be difficult for him to see the power of the magic scroll. On the other hand, he was also trying to incite another round of bidding by exhibiting more details. Grand Duke Viti's words caused yet another uproar in the auction hall. After all, the crowd had kind of seen the power that was contained in the magic scroll, and they didn't understand why Grand Duke Viti wanted to display it again. In particular, Harquis of the Octopus clan was furious because he was already so close to getting his hands on the magic scroll. Yet, Grand Duke Viti didn't follow the rules. In a fit of anger, Harquis stood up and was ready to protest against Grand Duke Viti. However, Hegel and Grand Elder Hayes unanimously stopped Harquis. Looking at the stage, Hegel said, "Let him showcase it. After all, the two of us haven't seen the Mageth on the scroll yet, and we'd like to see if it's worth it or not." When Hegel and Grand Elder arrived, Grand Duke Viti had already ended the display of the magic scroll, and what they knew about that magic scroll was all they had heard from Harquis. Although they could tell that Lin Li's attainment in the field of inscription was extremely high based on the Mageth, that didn't mean that the magic scroll was really impressive. After all, masters of inscription could also draw such Mageths. In case it was just an ordinary magic scroll, the hundreds of millions of gold coins would be spent in vain. Since even the Octopus clan didn't oppose it, the others who had withdrawn from the auction naturally wouldn't have much of an opinion. Seeing that no one was objecting to the proposal, Grand Duke Viti grabbed the magic scroll and slowly unrolled it to display it to the crowd again. With the previous experience, Grand Duke Viti switched on the 8-ocean dragon god barrier before unrolling the magic scroll. Hence, the magic scroll was soon presented in the same position as before. Perhaps because they had already made preparations in advance, the 8-ocean dragon god barrier this time was much stabler than before. Although it still seemed to be under great pressure, it was no longer shaking, and looking like it was on the verge of crumbling. Seeing this situation, Grand Duke Viti put his mind at ease and continued to unroll the scroll. At this point, Great Monarch Hegel of the Octopus Clan and Grand Elder Hayes were staring intently at the magic scroll in Grand Duke Vida's hands, as if their entire souls had been drawn to it. As they observed further, the expressions on their faces became impatient as they seemed to be wishing that they could grab it immediately and study it. Harquis was not at such a high realm yet, and he couldn't tell much from the magic scroll. Hence, he stared at his father's and the Grand Elder's expression for fear that they had made a mistake in their judgment. However, at this very moment, Hegel and Harquis had a sudden change in expression, and massive octopus phantoms appeared behind them in unison. At the same time, the tentacles that were formed from mana appeared from the space behind before drawing mysterious maggots towards the auction stage below the private room. He's not going to snatch the magic scrolls, is he? Harquis was shocked, and he turned to look at the auction stage, only to see that Grand Duke Vidi had already unrolled half of the magic scroll, while the 8-ocean dragon god barrier, which was resisting the power of the magic scroll, was covered in a large number of cracks, as if it might collapse at any time. Next, there was a series of loud explosive sounds coming from the auction as masses of dazzling bright lights emerged from the huge golden pillar that held up the 8-ocean dragon god barrier. The phantom of 8 Wyrms emerged from the golden pillar and looked up to the sky with a loud roar, as if it was the end of the world. At this moment, the maggots drawn by Hegel and Hayes had already fused into the magic barrier that was about to shatter to induce a force into the 8-ocean dragon god barrier. At the same time, the sanctuary powerhouses of several other forces had also struck at the same time. Several powerful sanctuary-level defenses piled up below the 8-ocean dragon god barrier. However, the sanctuary-level defenses were actually not as powerful as the 8-ocean dragon god barrier. After all, they still couldn't combine their respective defensive forces. Due to the fact that they were using the power of the maggots, Hegel and Hayes managed to use maggots to strengthen the power of the 8-ocean dragon god barrier. Hence, under the powerful pressure of that magic scroll, the sounds of the magic defenses shattering resounded throughout the venue. The sanctuary-level magic defenses were simply as fragile as eggshells that could barely sustain the burden for a second. The only thing to be thankful for was that there were many sanctuary powerhouses, and even if each of their maggots could hold up for only a second, they could still buy some time. Grand Duke Vidi, who made this change, was a little dumbfounded at this point. He originally intended to slowly display the power of the magic scroll and then put it away when they reached their limit. However, he had obviously overestimated his ability to control, and when that happened, he froze right on the spot. Damn it, Vidi, what are you doing? Hurry up and put that thing away. King Bradler was about to go mad. The people present were all important figures of their respective forces, such as the princes of the sea clans and the presidents of trade unions. If anything happened to them, the Gilded Kingdom would become the public enemy of the Endless Ocean. Bradler's roar finally made Grand Duke Vidi sober up a little as he hurriedly put away the magic scroll that he was holding. However, even so, the power that had been released wouldn't vanish immediately. Under the pressure of that terrifying power, the 8 Wyrms that were manifested from the 8-ocean dragon god barrier finally vanished in thin air while wailing. That meant that the 8-ocean dragon god barrier was collapsing too. Upon sight of such a situation, the sanctuary powerhouses who were present didn't dare to procrastinate at all as they continuously released layer after layer of magical defenses to resist the residual terrifying power of the magic scroll. After a few minutes of stalemate, the power of the magic scroll was finally blocked. 320 million gold coins. Before everyone could snap back to their senses, the members of the Jellyfish clan immediately placed a higher bid. Clearly, Grand Duke Vida's approach was effective as the terrifying power that the magic scroll displayed made the Jellyfish clan, who had originally planned to give up, join the bidding again. On the other hand, King Bradler initially intended to berate Grand Duke Vidi to vent his anger, and also to give an explanation to those who were shocked. However, when he saw that the Jellyfish clan placed a higher bid so soon, Bradler had no choice but to set the matter aside for now, and wait until the auction was over before settling scores with Grand Duke Vidi. 350 million gold coins, exclaimed Hegel of the Octopus clan, even more determined to get the magic scroll after he saw its power. In fact, he didn't even ask Harquis to bid on their behalf, and instead stood in front of the window of the private room to place the bid personally. Apart from Lin Li, the creator of the magic scroll, there was probably no one else in the auction hall who knew the value of the maggoth better than Hayes and Hegel did. It could be said that the magic scroll would be as useful to them as the Immortal King's Divine Smith level maggoth was to Lin Li, as it acted as a guiding light to the Divine Smith level for Lin Li. Not to mention a few 100 million gold coins, even if they were told to pay using half the sea area of the Octopus clan, they wouldn't hesitate at all. 360 million gold coins. When placing that bid, the jellyfish clan had already hesitated a little. Even though the terrifying power of that magic scroll was extremely appealing to them, they could only sense the massive power in the magic scroll. After all, their talent was in pharmaceutics. Sensing the hesitation of the jellyfish clan, Hegel didn't want to continue dragging it further. Immediately afterwards, he exclaimed, 400 million gold coins. This time, the people in the entire auction hall got into a sudden uproar. The heart of all evil had previously already set the highest record price in the history of the auction. To their surprise, the record was soon broken again by a magic scroll that everyone had questioned repeatedly. Everyone was also in disbelief of the price. After all, it was just a magic scroll in their eyes. The jellyfish clan finally gave up, and Grand Duke Viti had also recovered from the shock. He raised the wooden hammer in his hand, and loudly addressed the crowd, 400 million gold coins. Great Monarch Hegel of the Octopus clan has offered 400 million gold coins. Are there any higher bids? 400,000,000 gold coins. Going once. Of course, there weren't going to be any higher bidders. Apart from the fact that the magic scroll wasn't worth that much money in their opinion, no one present could afford so many gold coins, either. Grand Duke Viti asked thrice in accordance with the rules of the auction before finally lowering the wooden hammer in his hand onto the table with a loud thud. He then declared, sold. The new owner of this magic scroll, Mount Tai, is Great Monarch Hegel of the Octopus clan. It was as if there was a sudden storm in the auction hall, and everyone sprung up from their seats while applauding, and turning to look at the private room of the Octopus clan. On the one hand, they were congratulating Hegel for successfully obtaining the magic scroll, and on the other hand, they were congratulating the auctioneers for breaking the record. Besides, everyone had a hunch that the price of this item was not only unprecedented in the history of auctions, but also a record price that no one might be able to break in the future. However, at this point, Greena was on the verge of flipping the table and smashing things in the private room. Watching the magic scroll of his enemy getting sold for a sky-high price of 400 million gold coins was definitely not an amazing feeling. Greena could imagine how smug Lin Li would be when he faced the latter in the future. With the sale of the last item, the auction drew to an end, and Grand Duke Viti made a speech to thank the crowd before officially calling it a day. The people in the auction hall also began to leave one after another, but as they were leaving, they were discussing excitedly with each other the birth of a new record that they had just witnessed. Lin Li and his company were also ready to leave. The money that he would get from the auctioning of the magic scroll would be calculated and paid to him when the staff of the auction house visited him at the Tower of Dusk's embassy in the future. However, soon after he got up and led Connorus to the door, he heard a knock on the door from outside the private room. It turned out to be Queen Halia and Prince Cleve. President Falik, may I ask if it'd be convenient for you to spare us some time? Prince Cleve asked courteously after he saw Lin Li. If someone was around, their jaw would drop at this juncture. Prince Cleve was not only the prince of the Siren clan, but also a dignified figure of an extremely high status in the Endless Ocean, whereas Lin Li was only the president of a small, nameless force of the breezy plains. Their status was simply worlds apart. The fact that Prince Cleve was being so polite to Lin Li was beyond their imagination. Queen Halia, Prince Cleve, please come in. Although Lin Li was not flattered and surprised, he had a better impression of the two of them. While inviting them into the private room, he said in a relaxed tone, I'm really sorry. This is someone else's turf, after all, and I have nothing to serve you. Please have a seat. Lin Li knew that the siren's tears that he wanted would definitely not be delivered to him at this time. So Queen Halia and Prince Cleve were clearly there for another reason. It happened that he also had plans to cooperate with the Siren clan, so he decided to just take the opportunity to discuss it. President Falik, congratulations for having your magic scroll sold at a record price. I doubt anyone will be able to break that record in the future. After Prince Cleve got seated, he first congratulated Lin Li for the sale of his magic scroll at the price of 400 million gold coins. Of course, more importantly, he wanted to bring up the topic that he would talk to Lin Li about later. As soon as he heard Cleve mention the magic scroll, Lin Li knew that the other man's agenda probably had something to do with maggots. Hence, he said with a faint smile, I was just invited by Bradler to put something up for auction. I'm quite surprised that it managed to fetch such a high price too. You two probably aren't here just to congratulate me, right? It's not our first time crossing paths, so if there's anything, feel free to let me know. Prince Cleve. President Falik, pardon me for being blunt, but did you really create that magic scroll? After hearing what Lin Li said, Prince Cleve decided not to beat around the bush anymore, and simply asked the question that he was the most concerned about. Even though Grand Duke Viti had just said that the magic scroll had indeed been created by Lin Li, Cleve still found it hard to believe. In fact, there were many people at the auction who had the same doubts as Prince Cleve, and perhaps only the people of the Octopus clan would believe that the powerful magic scroll had been created by a young man like Lin Li. The vast majority of people were more willing to believe that Lin Li had simply taken the work of a certain legendary master of inscription and claimed it to be his own in order to enhance his reputation. That was the only way they could convince themselves and justify the fact that the magic scroll was sold at a final price of 400 million gold coins. Lin Li didn't show the slightest bit of displeasure after hearing Prince Cleve's question, and simply smiled nonchalantly. Ha ha, I've just gained some knowledge from studying maggots recently, and I happened to be invited to the auction by King Bradler, so I decided to put this scroll that I created during a practice session up for auction. Lin Li was telling the truth, but it would seem unbelievable to others that a practice piece could be auctioned for 400 million gold coins. Even Prince Cleve could not help but look at his wife Queen Halia after hearing those words. The female sirens were all masters of manipulating mental strength who were extremely sensitive to fluctuations in the mental strength of humans. In other words, they were like walking lie detectors, and the mental strength fluctuations of others could not escape their senses at all. Although Queen Halia didn't come here with the intention of being Cleve's lie detector, but to show her respect for Lin Li, it didn't stop her from checking if Lin Li was lying or not. However, the results caught Queen Halia by surprise because Lin Li's mental strength fluctuations seemed vast and boundless. Among the many sea clans in the endless ocean, the female sirens, who were natural-born masters of mental spells, had massive mental strength that very few people could compare to. On the other hand, Queen Halia, who was the strongest existence among the sea clans, had unparalleled mental strength. However, although it was only a simple contact via mental strength, Queen Halia's mental strength, which she had always been proud of, seemed like a small boat in the boundless sea. Compared to Lin Li's mental strength fluctuations, it was extremely difficult for her to withdraw completely. How can he have such massive mental strength? Queen Halia was dumbfounded. She imagined that only gods could have such massive mental strength. Yet, the person who owned it was a human, who was only in his early 20s. With that thought in mind, Queen Halia couldn't help but take a few more glances at Lin Li, only to feel like she couldn't figure him out at all. What kind of man is he? He became a sanctuary powerhouse in his early 20s, and has achieved so much in the field of inscription. Yet, he even has such a terrifying mental strength. Is he still one of the humans I know? Queen Halia's mental strength inspection could not be detected by ordinary sanctuary powerhouses at all, but Lin Li not only had massive mental strength, it had also been refined by the immortal king. Hence, he managed to detect it upon first contact. However, Lin Li didn't expose Halia, and merely smiled at her. At this moment, Prince Cleve also discovered his wife's strange reaction, but male sirens were not proficient in the field of mental strength and mental spells, so he naturally wouldn't know how shocked his wife was at the moment. Fortunately, Queen Halia soon recovered from the shock, and looked at her husband with a nod of her head to indicate that the Magath was indeed created by Lin Li. Although she did not detect whether Lin Li was lying at all using her mental strength inspection, when she thought about Lin Li's great and boundless mental strength, she instinctively felt that Lin Li wouldn't lie about it. This is such a rare genius. His massive mental strength is comparable to the gods, so who can be certain that he doesn't have such high attainments in the field of inscription? After discovering that matter, Queen Halia's considerations were no longer about the issue of Magaths, but the hope that she could cooperate more with Lin Li, who was a great genius that didn't seem human at all. Prince Cleve did not know what his wife was thinking, but after receiving her confirmation, he finally told Lin Li about the favor that he needed from him. President Flick, the thing is, I knew that you must have extremely high attainments in inscription when I saw your Magath. Well, we managed to get the heart of all evil with your help previously, but in order to optimize its power, we still need a Magath to match it. Therefore, we came here this time in hopes that you could create a complementary Magath for the heart of all evil at your convenience. Hearing this, Lin Li also completely understood their intentions. In fact, it was just a trivial matter for him. Besides, through his contact with Prince Cleve, he also had a good impression of the Siren clan, and intended to cooperate with them. Hence, he didn't pretend and simply nodded. Oh, I see. It happens that I also yearn to visit the vast, beautiful ocean. Once I'm done with handling the matters here, I'll find some time to visit you. Lin Li was not trying to suck up to them. Apart from the beauty of the female sirens, the Siren clan shared many similarities to the elves in various aspects, which was the reason that they were called the elves of the sea. One of the aspects was the construction of their living environment. In the endless sea, the sirens were located in the Star Crescent Sea, which was famous for its beautiful scenery, and wasn't inferior to the Emerald Forest of the elves. Prince Cleve and Queen Halia felt extremely proud after hearing Lin Li's words. Of course, They were mostly overjoyed that Lin Li had agreed to help. Prince Cleve suppressed the joy within him and stood up to say to Lin Li, "All right, President Flick, in a few days we will deliver the siren's tears that you wanted." Halfway through Prince Cleve's sentence, there was a sudden violent tremor coming from the ground. At the same time, they also felt a massive and aggressive aura coming from Helena Port. They were now in the Gilded Kingdom's capital, which could be considered the safest place in the whole Gilded Kingdom. Yet, there was such a bizarre change, which was simply unbelievable. At this moment, Lin Li didn't have the time to say anything at all. He hurriedly walked out of the private room. The people in the auction hall were also walking out of the auction hall one after another in a bid to find out what exactly had happened. When Lin Li and the others walked out of the private room, they happened to see Bradler and Monterey, who had also just walked out, and were surprised to see that Queen Halia and Prince Cleve were beside Lin Li. However, the surprise was fleeting because to Bradler, the more important thing to do now was to get a clear idea of what had happened outside. Everything else was secondary. At the same time, there was also a disastrous scene outside Helena Port as the dark clouds that were accumulating in the sky looked just like ink. There was a storm raging right above the surface of the sea, and waves were surging hundreds of meters high. The roar of the waves crashing against each other sounded incessantly in the sea, as if there was thunder rolling at the bottom of the sea. There were 2 fleets belonging to the Gilded Kingdom at the periphery of the sea, and one of them was the 7th Fleet, which was responsible for the safety of this sea in place of the 5th Fleet. The other was the 1st Fleet, which was also known as the Gilded Kingdom's Ace Fleet. The stark contrast between the 2 fleets was obvious when they were put together. Firstly, the most obvious difference was in size. The size of the 1st Fleet was thrice that of the 7th Fleet. Secondly, it was the number of alchemical battleships. There were 25 alchemical battleships that acted as the main combat power of the 1st Fleet, making it almost comparable to the Tower of Dusk's ship, the Star. The other supportive battleships were also well equipped. However, at this time, those 2 fleets, be it the main battleships or auxiliary battleships, were just like tiny boats in a storm that would sink any time. In such a situation, the 2 fleets could only barely maintain their formation, but none of them dared to dive deep into the storm to check out the situation. On the bridge of the Great Wave, a ship belonging to the 1st Fleet, Critia, the commander-in-chief, was frowning while looking at the depths of the dark thunderstorm. As a naval commander-in-chief, he could naturally tell that the scene before him, which resembled a natural disaster, was not related to the climate of the ocean, but rather was an abnormal phenomenon triggered by something. Critia could not imagine what kind of terrifying existence could trigger such a catastrophic change in weather, but he was sure that it definitely wasn't easy to deal with. The fact that he could rise to such a high position was not only because of the senatorial families, but also because of the accumulation of his merits in battle. As far as Critia could remember, one of the most thrilling experiences of his was leading the 1st Fleet on a mission to expel a sanctuary-level marine magical beast from the kingdom, but the battle then seemed to pale in comparison to the scene in front of him now, even though the sanctuary-level marine magical beast had also caused shocking phenomena. That was precisely the reason that Critia didn't impulsively send his subordinates to go deep into the ocean to check out the situation. He was well aware that even his powerful flagship would not be able to go deep into the center of the storm easily, let alone the other battleships that were meant for reconnaissance. Now, all Critia could do was to wait for the 2 fleets to be battle-ready, and wait for the being in the storm to reveal itself. Of course, the best-case scenario would be that the terrifying being was just passing by that area of the sea. Otherwise, he reckoned that it would be impossible to stop that existence even with both fleets. At this moment, the storm suddenly stopped, and the massive waves and ripples all disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The surface of the sea was so calm that it even looked like a mirror. However, the dark clouds in the sky did not dissipate, and instead became thicker and thicker. There were also countless bolts of lightning in the sky. As soon as he saw the situation, Critia immediately tensed up and instructed his fleet to get ready for a battle. Once Critia issued the order, there were once again changes on the surface of the sea that seemed to be shrouded in dark clouds. A massive shadow gradually surfaced like an island rising from the bottom of the sea. At the same time, it was also leaning towards the 2 fleets. Finally, Critia saw the true appearance of the shadow, and it turned out to be a humongous black whale. Although giant whales were not that rare in the endless ocean, the one in front of him now was extremely different from the common giant whales. Not only was its body dozens of times larger, it also looked a lot more menacing and ferocious than ordinary giant whales. This black giant whale, which probably shouldn't be called a giant whale, had a large, thick black horn that resembled the mast of a battleship on the top of its head. At the same time that it surfaced from the ocean, a huge pair of fleshy wings spread open on its back. They seemed to be large enough to cover the sky, but the slight flapping did not seem to cause any waves. When Critia saw the true appearance of the black whale, he couldn't help but be so frightened that he almost fell onto the ground, even though he usually kept his composure in all situations. Despite remaining silent on the surface, he was screaming crazily in his heart, "The wild whale Rabu! It's the legendary wild whale Rabu! Why is it here?" Fortunately, Critia didn't yell out loud. Otherwise, the people of the fleet would probably lose all their morale after hearing the terrifying name. The wild whale Rabu was said to have the same bloodline as the ancient barbarous whale and the ancient demon deities. Hence, besides having the massive and powerful body of the ancient barbarous whale, it also had some characteristics of the abyssal demons. It was born at the end of the prehistoric times and was at least a few 100,000 years old now. It had caused countless disasters in the history of the endless ocean, and even another great beast, myriad evil, could not compare to it. Fortunately, the wild whale Rabu would often slip into hibernation for thousands of years at a time. Otherwise, the endless ocean would have been destroyed by him. Before the establishment of the Ocean Dynasty, the ones who dominated the endless ocean was the Sea Spirit clan, known as the descendants of the Sea God. The Sea Spirit clan was said to enjoy the protection of the Sea God. Although they did not unify and rule over all the sea clans like the Ocean Dynasty, they were definitely ranked at the very top in terms of strength. At that time, they were also the most likely clan to dominate the endless ocean. In terms of appearance, the Sea Spirit clan resembled the High Elves of the mainland of Anril, and their talent was not inferior to that of the High Elves. During their prime, the Sea Spirit clan had nearly 20 sanctuary powerhouses and countless legendary powerhouses. Their powerful troops dominated the endless ocean, and all the sea clans were in awe and respect of them. However, Rabu's sudden awakening in a trench in the sea where the Sea Spirit clan resided resulted in a huge disaster that struck the Sea Spirit clan. At that time, an evil thunderstorm engulfed the Sea Spirit clan's territory in the sea, turning the entire area into the feeding ground of Rabu the wild whale. When the storm subsided, the dark clouds scattered, and the Sea Spirit clan, that was once powerful and domineering, was completely wiped out of the endless ocean, thus becoming a clan that existed only in myths and legends. Now, the terrifying wild whale Rabu actually appeared in the sea territory of the Gilded Kingdom, which made Critia's hands and feet clammy even though he had been through all sorts of situations. "Attack! Attack at full power!" Critia exclaimed at the top of his lungs after coming back to his senses. All the battleships facing the black whale immediately activated their weapons, and the light of the cannons on the alchemical battleships intertwined to form a massive net. The sea god bolts that were as thick as human waist darted towards Rabu, almost drowning out its massive body. However, an attack of such a level was indeed considered insignificant to Rabu. Although the attacks seemed powerful, they were only at the legendary level, and it wasn't that easy to hurt the wild whale Rabu. With the ground-breaking roar, massive ripples once again formed on the surface of the sea that had just calmed down, and numerous waves emerged before smacking against the attacks of the Gilded Kingdom's fleets. The sea god bolts that were made of hard metal were powerful enough to pierce even mountains, but they were crushed by the waves that seemed rather ordinary. The light of the cannons on the ship, which was condensed from pure mana, had power that was akin to legendary level attack spells, but it was similarly destroyed easily by the waves. The powerful attacks that the Gilded Kingdom's fleets launched seemed to be able to destroy everything, but they were extremely powerless in the face of Rabu. The attacks were akin to an ant's attempt at punching an elephant, absolutely useless. Immediately afterwards, Rabu retaliated, and the wind and waves on the surface of the sea fell violently, followed by the appearance of large water blades that resembled the dorsal fins of sharks, which charged towards the vessels of the Gilded Kingdom. The large water blades had risen higher than the flagpoles of the alchemical battleships and broke through the water with sharp, whistling sounds. They seemed to be trying to slice the battleships. Fortunately, Critia was very conscientious. Even though he had instructed the fleets to launch a wave of attacks, he did not forget about the defense. In fact, at the beginning of the attacks, he knew that the attacks would be futile, and the goal of his fleet was no longer to expel Rabu, but to survive in its presence. Hence, while attacking, the fleet had also gotten into a defensive formation and maximized the defensive array. The defensive force field engulfed the fleet like solid crystals. However, the defense could not really stop the attack of wild whale Rabu. The others weren't aware of the legend about Rabu, so they were still rather confident in the fleet's defense. However, Critia couldn't bring himself to be that optimistic. If the wild whale Rabu's attack could have been resisted easily, the powerful Sea Spirit clan would not have been annihilated. Just as Critia feared, when the first water blade hit the fleet's defensive force field, the latter started shaking. In fact, they could all clearly see the cobweb-like cracks that appeared on the crystal-like defensive force field. The closest battleship, which was protected by the defensive force, had also begun shaking violently under the impact of the collision. Like a lone boat floating on waves, it seemed extremely powerless and helpless. However, there were countless such attacks launched by Rabu. At this moment, all the people on the battleships began operating the defensive arrays at full power. Even though they didn't know that the black giant whale was the legendary wild whale Rabu, they knew that the attacks were definitely not easy to block. The 7th Fleet was the first to bear the brunt. Due to the fact that they were only responsible for the offshore defense, and were deployed for the sake of it, they definitely couldn't face a powerful enemy like Rabu, even if they could cope with some illegal merchants or pirates. The water blade slashes that Rabu launched blasted the 7th Fleet's defense field, which seemed to be sturdy, one after another, shattering it in the blink of an eye. Even the powerful alchemical battleships were sliced in half by the blades in the blink of an eye. Upon sight of what happened to the 7th Fleet, Critia had no choice but to close his eyes helplessly. It wasn't that he was being ruthless, but rather his fleet was barely able to support itself under the attack of wild whale Rabu, so he didn't have the means to save the 7th Fleet at all. In fact, the situation faced by the 1st Fleet was extremely critical too, and the defensive arrays on the battleships were already overloaded, but they were still as fragile as eggshells, and were on the verge of shattering. Finally, the flagship of the 7th Fleet exploded, and gradually sank to the bottom of the sea, thus concluding that the 7th Fleet had become part of the history of the Gilded Kingdom. Faced with such a situation, Critia no longer seemed melancholic, because he knew that the current fate of the 7th Fleet was the future of the 1st Fleet. Perhaps the 1st Fleet would follow in the footsteps of the 7th Fleet in the next moment. At this moment, a few figures cut through the sky from Helena Port like bolts of lightning, and appeared above the 1st Fleet. They were none other than the sanctuary powerhouses of the Gilded Kingdom, and the few senatorial families. Now that Rabu had arrived, they had no choice but to intervene, even though they usually stayed out of such matters. There were also many other figures arriving one after another after them. They were Queen Halia and Prince Cleve of the Siren clan, Grina and the 4 divine generals of the Great Shark clan, as well as many other sanctuary powerhouses of the Thunder Eel clan, Octopus clan, Barbarous Whale clan, and various other sea clans. Saint Edmund and Elder Zoomer of the Illuminati and High Priest Sendros of the Darkness Shrine, followed by Lin Li and his subordinates of the Tower of Dusk, had all arrived too. It could be said that all the sanctuary powerhouses and peak legendary powerhouse, who were on Four Seasons Island, had all flown over to this area at this point. Of course, they didn't share a common goal. Lin Li and the others from the mainland were there only out of curiosity. It's the wild whale Rabu. Why did it appear here? To the mighty figures of the sea clans, the wild whale Rabu was more than just a myth and legend. Although Rabu had appeared in the waters of the Gilded Kingdom, it was a nightmare that the sea clans had no choice but to face. Upon seeing the sudden abnormalities caused by Rabu, that had previously existed only in myths and legends, Bradler almost passed out. In the beginning, Bradler was in high spirits because of the sea market and the founding celebration. However, the appearance of Rabu dampened his mood and made his heart sink. Does God want to destroy the Gilded Kingdom? Bradler struggled and managed to keep himself conscious, but deep down, he wished that he had passed out. Everyone knew that Rabu was the nemesis of the endless ocean, as it would destroy everything in its path. Apart from the destruction of the Sea Spirit clan that was mentioned in the myths, there were also historical records of deaths of many sea clans caused by Rabu. Although there were many sanctuary powerhouses gathered there now, Bradler didn't feel confident at all. According to the legends, there were nearly 20 sanctuary powerhouses that got annihilated by Rabu, along with the powerful legions composed of numerous legendary powerhouses. Moreover, the sanctuary powerhouses of those sea clans wouldn't make saving the Gilded Kingdom their priority. When the worst came to the worst, they would probably all flee and go separate ways. No one would be willing to stay behind and perish together with the Gilded Kingdom. With that thought in mind, Bradler was in desperation. At this moment, when Bradler turned his head and saw Saint Edmund, he immediately felt like he had found a straw to clutch at. He eagerly said, "Saint Edmund, the Illuminati and the Gilded Kingdom have always stood in solidarity with each other. Now that we're facing such a huge crisis, you can't leave us in the lurch." Hearing Bradler's words, Saint Edmund couldn't help but seem conflicted. He naturally understood how Bradler felt, and knew that Bradler had stated a fact. If the Illuminati left the Gilded Kingdom, it would lose its foundation, and thus wouldn't be able to sustain its existence for long. However, they were now about to face the legendary wild whale Rabu. Even if the Illuminati used all their power, they probably wouldn't be able to do anything to Rabu. Everyone, the wild whale Rabu has awakened again, and I'm afraid that the endless ocean will suffer countless calamities. I hope that we can all put aside our past feuds and grudges against each other for the time being, and tied through this crisis together, not only for the sake of the Gilded Kingdom, but also for the sake of the peace in the Endless Ocean. Although Edmund was only a saint of the Illuminati, his words carried considerable weight because of his great power. Besides, Saint Edmund was right. No one could be certain that Rabu would really go into hibernation again after destroying the Gilded Kingdom, and God knew who its next target would be. Staying as far away as possible from Rabu didn't guarantee absolute safety, because Rabus' activity in the sea didn't follow a regular pattern at all. Perhaps it might now turn around and charge towards the other sea areas. Simply put, Rabu was the public enemy of all the sea clans, and the last time it went into hibernation was the result of the joint efforts of all the sea clans, which the Ocean Dynasty had unified. Although the Ocean Dynasty was no longer around now, and the powerful Ocean royal family had declined, the powerhouses of the other sea clans were still present, and they might be able to recreate their glory. Edmund's words immediately gained the approval of the crowd, especially the strongest of the several sea clans. Regardless of whether they were genuine about it or not, they declared that they definitely wouldn't stand by and do nothing. At this moment, the defensive force field of the First Fleet below finally faltered and collapsed under a random attack Rabu launched. Some of the lightweight battleships that were not prepared for the attack were immediately shattered into pieces by the aftershock and sunk to the bottom of the sea. Only 20-odd heavyweight alchemical battleships were barely holding on under the powerful attack. Seeing this situation, Saint Edmund knew that the First Fleet of the Gilded Kingdom would really be destroyed if he didn't take action. At this moment, he swung the Chaos Scepter in his hand, and a 4-headed and 8-armed Chaos Demon deity appeared. The massive power engulfed the remaining battleships. Seeing that Saint Edmund had attacked, the remaining sanctuary powerhouses naturally didn't dare to delay any longer as they started attacking Rabu, which was far away. He didn't know whether to say that the Gilded Kingdom was lucky or unlucky to face Rabu as soon as it awakened after being in hibernation for more than 1,000 years. However, all the powerhouses of the various clans were fortunately gathered here at this time. If it were another time, the Gilded Kingdom probably wouldn't be able to escape the ordeal even if they had a trump card. However, even though there were so many sanctuary powerhouses, it didn't mean that the Gilded Kingdom could really survive the ordeal. Rabu had existed since prehistoric times, and its current strength had already reached the level of a demigod, which was considered a nearly invincible existence. Although the Gilded Kingdom had the support of the sanctuary powerhouses of various clans, it wasn't easy for them to deal with such a terrifying existence like Rabu. Under the protection of the huge Chaos Demon deity statue, the remaining ships of the First Fleet began to evacuate from the sea because a battle at this level was no longer something they could participate in. A powerful giant alchemical battleship was just like a child's toy in comparison to Rabu. As long as its power wasn't at the sanctuary level, it wouldn't be able to cause the slightest harm to Rabu. However, it was obvious that even a powerful sanctuary powerhouse like Saint Edmund could barely hold up under Rabus' attack. Rabus' fins were like large blades that were parting the sea and striking the Chaos Demon deity's body ruthlessly. Each strike seemed to be able to make the Chaos Demon deity's body tremble vigorously. Fortunately, the surrounding sanctuary powerhouses of the various sea clans didn't stand by and do nothing at this juncture. They began attacking Rabu and shared some of the brunt that Saint Edmund had to bear. First of all, the 4 divine generals of the Giant Shark clan summoned the ancient giant shark that was silver and glistening, and then leapt from midair onto its back. The 4 divine generals casually reached their hands into the sea, and long aquamarine spears dozens of meters long appeared in the hand of each of them. While riding on Rabus' back, they looked like war gods, and they began charging towards Rabu. Although Grina had been greatly angered during the auction, and he was extremely displeased with the Gilded Kingdom's decision to defend the Tower of Dusk, it was a good chance for him to salvage his pride now. If his team contributed greatly to overcoming the ordeal this time, the Gilded Kingdom would no longer have the cheek to defend Grina's enemy, the Tower of Dusk. Another important reason was that the legend of the wild whale, Rabu, dated back to a long time ago before the present era. Young Sea Clan members like Grina did not have a very clear understanding of how terrifying Rabu was. In Grina's opinion, his 4 divine generals were all sanctuary powerhouses, and as long as Rabu wasn't a true deity, it would definitely have limited abilities. Hence, under Grina's command, the 4 divine generals of the Giant Shark clan charged towards the battlefield without hesitation. They were sanctuary powerhouses, but their combat energy was not conspicuous, and seemed to be just a faint golden layer that was wrapped around their bodies, resembling golden armor. Although the 4 divine generals did not experience the era of Rabus massacres, they were sanctuary powerhouses, after all, and thus had a clearer understanding of the horrifying aura exuded by Rabu. Hence, when attacking Rabu, the 4 of them formed a diamond-shaped battle formation, and then darted towards Rabu like 4 rays of lightning. Although the 4 divine generals had suffered quite a huge loss in front of the Tower of Dusk's embassy, a large part of it was because of the fact that they had underestimated the Tower of Dusk. As sanctuary powerhouses, they naturally wouldn't take an enemy like Conorus, who they thought was stuck at the peak of the legendary level, seriously. However, they didn't expect that Conorus was powerful enough to rival the sanctuary powerhouses. Now that they were facing Rabu, who was a demigod, the 4 divine generals would probably be fools if they still had the same mindset as before. At this moment, they fully exerted their combat energy and exuded their true sanctuary level power without any negligence. However, before the 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan could reach Rabu, the latter flat its fin-like wings, and its massive body flew out of the sea, looking like a mountain peak that was floating above the sea surface. However, it didn't fly very high, and was hovering only about less than 20 meters from the surface of the sea, revealing its body. Immediately afterwards, a large jet of water suddenly spurted out from Rabu's back, which looked similar to an ordinary whale blowing water. However, the water jet became thicker and higher, as if it was about to soar up to the clouds. It darted into the sky, and then spread apart before falling down like millions of water arrows that engulfed the entire sea, and not just the 4 divine generals. There were several islands in this sea area because it was near 4 Seasons Island. Those that were once quite prosperous already lost all vitality. Under the impact of the water arrows that Rabu spouted, the islands couldn't survive. Each water arrow that fell on the islands would result in a loud explosive sound, followed by the collapse of the island. Soon, all the islands collapsed and vanished without a trace in front of everyone. Seeing this scene, Bradler was really heartbroken. Even though the wealth and people on those islands had been wiped out, there would still be hope for reconstruction as long as the islands still existed. Unfortunately, Rabu pulled a ruthless move on them this time and destroyed the islands too. Even if they could survive this calamity, it would be difficult to make up for the losses. In other words, every inch of land of each island was very valuable to a sea kingdom. If an island was occupied by an enemy, they would still have hopes of regaining possession of the island. But if the islands were destroyed, there was nothing that could be done, and it would be tantamount to the Gilded Kingdom losing their sea territories. In particular, the islands in the vicinity of 4 Seasons Island each had indispensable and irreplaceable functions, be it in terms of military or economy. Now that the islands had been destroyed, it would be impossible to rebuild them, and it was almost as if this sea area had lost its original value. On the other hand, the 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan could only temporarily focus their energy on dealing with the countless water arrows. Although the water arrows seemed ordinary, each one contained an extremely terrifying power that even the 4 sanctuary powerhouses, who were physically strong, didn't dare to risk contending with. The 4 divine generals wielded the aquamarine spears in their hands skillfully, and continuously shattered the water arrows that fell on them. Their combat energy was like golden flames that shone brightly and looked like 4 golden torches from afar. Seeing that the 4 divine generals under him had been blocked, Grina's expression turned sullen. He initially thought that even if they couldn't deter Rabu, they should also be able to make Rabu suffer some pain, and show the crowd how powerful the giant shark clan was. However, the 4 divine generals were the ones who were suffering now, and Rabu didn't take them seriously at all. Of course, the surrounding crowd was not aware of Grina's intentions, so when they saw that the 4 divine generals had charged forward, they thought that they naturally couldn't lag behind. Manson, the prince of the Thunder Eel clan, might have just entered the sanctuary realm, but he was a true sanctuary powerhouse after all. Seeing this situation, he wanted to rush forward to display his incredible power as a sanctuary powerhouse, but as soon as Manson moved, he was stopped by the Thunder Eel clan elders, who were behind him. "Stand down. This is not a battle that you can participate in," Elder Gabari of the Thunder Eel clan hollered after blocking Manson. Although Manson had already reached the sanctuary realm, he was still worlds apart from Rabu. Besides, Manson was the prince of the Thunder Eel clan. Even if he was strong enough, Gabari wouldn't let him take the risk. As the Grand Elder, Gabari had an extraordinary position in the Thunder Eel clan too, so important that even the great monarch of the Thunder Eel clan had to be respectful to him. Hence, despite being reluctant, Manson didn't dare to show a hint of dissatisfaction with Gabari. He had no choice but to retreat to the back obediently. After stopping Manson, Gabari didn't bother looking at his disgruntled expression. Instead, he rubbed his hands together and waved his palm at Rabu without chanting any incantations. A purple electric python that was as thick as a bucket was soon shot at Rabu with a loud roar. Although the Thunder Eel clan was known as the mages of lightning at sea, their abilities were inborn. This was the same as magical beasts from the lightning elemental group that could only cast spells through recitation. The elder of the Thunder Eels, Gabari, was a veteran sanctuary powerhouse and a legendary figure in the Endless Sea. It was said that at the end of the Dark Age, he once took on the form of a human to participate in the Great War that overthrew the High Elves. Furthermore, there was also a story about how he went to the Anral to challenge the human god of mages, Garesco. No one knew if the story was true, or what the results of their battle were, but for Gabari to come out alive, he had to be comparable to his opponent. The purple lightning snake that was released by Gabari contained the original rules of lightning. When it appeared, it set the air on fire, and its tyrannical destructive aura even brought discomfort to everyone around it. People could also spot streaks of crack in the space along the trajectory that the eel-like lightning traveled. Immediately after, the purple lightning snake seemed to have traveled across different spaces. It blasted on Wild Whale Rabu the moment it left Gabari's hands. A point of light first appeared on the body of the huge black whale. Then, the people could see numerous thunder eels emerging from around the light. It was as if the eels had enveloped half of Rabu's body. The space became incredibly bright, and the ear-splitting blasts from the thunderbolts were like a storm. It sounded as if the space was about to collapse. If it had been any common beast from the sea, it would have been burnt into charcoal. But Wild Whale Rabu was obviously not any ocean beast. The terrifying lightning attack rained for quite a while on its huge body, followed by the attacks launched by the serpent-shaped lightning on its horn. In the blink of an eye, the sanctuary realm attacks made by Gabari were all absorbed by the horn of Wild Whale Rabu. There weren't any injuries on Wild Whale Rabu. Instead, its horn that had absorbed all the terrifying forces looked more dazzling than just now. Roar! Rabu let out a low roar. Although there were no words, the pervasive tone of disdain was apparent to all. It was as though the whale was voicing its contempt for the four divine generals and Gabari from the giant shark clan, as they were not qualified to be its opponents. The four divine generals could not allow themselves to be belittled by Wild Whale Rabu. Although they were all aware that the whale was a beast that had lived through the prehistoric times and was half a step from being a divine, it did not mean that they would tolerate such disrespect. The four divine generals roared in unison as their bodies suddenly became a dozen times larger, as if they had all turned into golden statues. Then, the four golden statues ignored the water arrows falling over their heads, and wielded their aquamarine spears, which had also grown dozens of times larger, and rammed them into Wild Whale Rabu. However, Wild Whale Rabu was indifferent to their attack. It gently flapped its sky-covering wings, and sent countless tornadoes from the sea surface towards the four of them. 2 was the maximum number of tornadoes that the four divine generals could dodge. The countless tornadoes that were coming at them gave them no chance of escaping at all. They could only try their best to resist. Yet, their efforts in resisting were like a trap. The harder they resisted, the more intense the tornadoes grew. Fortunately, Elder Hayes from the Octopus clan joined the battle at the same time. There were 8 enormous magic arms waving above his head which formed a Mageth with a terrorizing aura. The completion of the Mageth caused the seawater to bubble violently, forming tentacles made of water and surging from the water body. Some of these tentacles swirled towards the tornadoes. Although they couldn't destroy the tornadoes, they helped to buy time for the 4 divine generals from the giant shark clan to make their escape. The rest of the tentacles were wrapped around Wild Whale Rabu, as though they were determined to pull Wild Whale Rabu back into the sea. Then, Prince Cleve from the Siren clan took out a long crystal bow and created an arrow with countless magnificent magical elements. In the blink of an eye, the arrow that appeared was radiating terrifying magical waves. With a sound, the arrow that was notched on the bow shot towards Wild Whale Rabu like a meteor. Prince Cleve looked a bit weak after he launched the arrow. Anyone would be able to tell that the attack had to be one of his trump cards. At the same time, Wild Whale Rabu seemed to be paying some attention to the arrow. Blinding silver lights shot out from its horn as the whale directed a bolt of lightning towards the meteor-like arrow. It was more powerful than Gabari's serpent-like lightning. The sight did not disappoint Prince Cleve. If his arrow could be so easily countered, it wouldn't have the right to be his trump card. The arrow flashed when it was about to collide with the bolt of lightning. Then, it pierced through the lightning as though the 2 attacks belonged to 2 different worlds. As expected, Cleve's arrow struck Rabu's body after it pierced through the lightning, and a lump of magnificent light rays shone through the body. What followed was a tremendous tremble and a sound of explosion. It was as though the earth was about to collapse. The whale was hit. Evrion's face radiated with joy when that happened. It was as though that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, their joy was short-lived. It vanished very quickly when they saw that the arrow merely sent the whale a step back. It did not injure the whale at all. No doubt, The sight was upsetting to Cleve as well. He gritted his teeth and raised his bow once more, and launched 7 consecutive arrows towards Wild Whale Rabu. Every arrow manifested sanctuary-level powers, and their trajectories brought about long streaks of cracks in the space. At this time, while Saint Edmund had already escorted the Gilded Kingdom's fleet out of the region, his gigantic chaos demon deity was still in sight. It pounced towards Wild Whale Rabu as its 8 arms created magic fingerprints. Countless gigantic whirlpools appeared in the sky, and streaks of light of chaos shot out from them, and blasted towards Rabu collectively. Sanctuary powerhouses from the other clans did not stay idle, either. Elder Gabari did not sit back after his first unsuccessful attack. He continued to charge towards Wild Whale Rabu with 2 lightning balls, that sent bolts of lightning towards it. The 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan did not delay any longer after they broke free from the tornadoes. Their aquamarine spears sounded as they approached Wild Whale Rabu fearlessly, establishing the dominance of a combat energy at the sanctuary realm. The elder of the octopus clan, Hayes, continued to create streaks of mageth out of thin air. Although they had a mixture of binding and weakening effects, they ensured that Wild Whale Rabus was enveloped with spells that were tasked to bring its powers down. Even the 2 sanctuary powerhouses from the sea serpents revealed their venomous fangs as they circled around Wild Whale Rabu, looking for a chance to attack. The attacks made by the many sanctuary powerhouses were like constant waves crashing against Wild Whale Rabu. Yet, Rabu was like a reef in the sea that remained unmoved by all the waves. At the same time, the sea surface started to shake violently. What followed was waves of lava spewing out of the sea. However, the lava did not cool down after it spewed out. Its color turned the sea red, as though it was on fire. Zoro, a divine general from Giant Shark Clan, did not manage to dodge in time. He got splashed by the lava head-on and washed up the air with the silver shark he was riding on. Fortunately, the high temperature of the lava was not deadly to a sanctuary powerhouse like him. If he had been one of the legendary powerhouses, he would have been burned to ashes. But, even so, the injuries that Zoro suffered were not light at all. The glow of his combat energy significantly dimmed as compared to before. Grrrr, Wild Whale Rabu growled. It was finally losing its patience with the mole crickets around it. Its growl spawned great waves that surged 100 meters tall. The waves did not return to the sea straight away, but evolved into gigantic water elemental statues in the air. Each of these water elemental giants radiated sanctuary-level aura. After they took shape, they stepped on the sea surface and pounced towards the sanctuary powerhouses who surrounded Rabu. After all, Rabu was a powerhouse that was half a step away from being a divinity. With it having a great mastery of the laws of the world, it did not require Rabu any effort to create these sanctuary-level giants. And that was not all. Countless large whirlpools appeared as the water elemental giants wrestled with the sanctuary powerhouses. The movement of the whirlpools cleared the water within it and turned them into enormous holes. Then, gigantic bestial heads that were made of water rose from the center of the whirlpools. Some of them tried to bite the sanctuary powerhouses, who were close to them, while the rest started to splatter all sorts of magic attacks at the surroundings. There were hundreds and thousands of such heads emerging from the sea, and their spells seemed to envelop the entire sea. At this time, the sanctuary powerhouses from various clans were in hot soup. Defeating Rabu was not the main priority anymore. It was already not easy to keep their lives. Damn it, now I understand how a wild whale could bring the entire Sea Spirit clan to their downfall, remarked Bradler in resignation. He really could not think of how they could overcome this calamity. Greena from the Giant Shark clan was deeply troubled as well. He certainly did not expect Wild Whale Rabu to be so powerful. If he'd known, he would have brought his men far away from the area instead of sending his 4 divine generals against Rabu. Why would he care about Wild Whale Rabu when it was just a whale that might return to hibernation after it eliminated the Gilded Kingdom? But now it was a little late for regret. Although the 4 divine generals had only been locked in battle with Rabu for a short while, the injuries on their bodies were not light. However, it was impossible for them to leave the battle now. They'd either get rid of Wild Whale Rabu or get killed by it. There was no other possibility. But it seemed to be impossible for them to defeat Wild Whale Rabu. Most of the sanctuary powerhouses from all the clans were gravely injured, while the furious Wild Whale Rabu remained unharmed. Anybody who had brains would be able to tell that the outcome would definitely not be favorable if this situation were to persist. It was now that Greena realized something problematic. While the sanctuary powerhouses from the Gilded Kingdom and each of the sea clans had stepped up to fight against Wild Whale Rabu, Fulik from the Tower of Dusk was still being a bystander. It certainly did not help Greena feel better knowing that Lin Li was a foe who snatched stuff from him. It was first the slaves from Seahorse clan, followed by the dark gold magic dragon armor and heart of all evil at the auction. All of these on top of the humiliation he felt when they were outside the embassy of the Tower of Dusk. Seeing Lin Li's indifference made Grina's blood boil. He couldn't stay cool any longer. President Felix, are you going to continue watching? Grina questioned loudly, not only because of the hectic environment here, but also to draw the attention of other people. He knew that everyone was on the same boat against Rabu, so anyone who were to do a half-asterisk said job would definitely be abhorred by the others. Sure enough, Grina's words immediately drew the attention of the surrounding crowd, and people's gazes were all at once directed at Lin Li. Oh, yes. President Felix is a high-ranking sanctuary powerhouse. How can he stay put and allow the others to risk their lives? The rest of the people who stayed behind were either people of great status, or those who did not have enough ability to participate in the battle. How could Lin Li, as a sanctuary powerhouse, be part of the bystanders? People thought. Hence, Grina's reminder added looks of disgust on the people's faces. However, Lin Li remained unaffected. You can see better if you stand here, said Lin Li, calmly with his eyes focused on the battlefield. Lin Li's statement created more dissatisfaction among the people. Is he treating this battle as a child's play? This was especially so for Bradler, who only tried to keep Lin Li on his good side because of Saint Edmund. He hadn't forgotten the 2 slaps that landed on his face. And now, the Gilded Kingdom had already reached the brink of death. If they failed to get rid of Wild Whale Rabu, the kingdom would be doomed. Bradler naturally felt that it was not the time to care about flattering Lin Li anymore. President Felix, I know it is inappropriate for me to say this, as you are our guests, but as a fellow human being, I hope you would assist us in defeating that whale, said Bradler as he turned back to Lin Li. Although he was unhappy with Lin Li for choosing to be a bystander, he knew he should not be too tough with him. He even brought up the fact that they were all fellow human beings. He was, after all, trying to seek help from Lin Li, and the Gilded Kingdom was the only force in the endless ocean that was made up of mankind. Your Majesty, you should stop putting your hopes on him. You should now be well aware what kind of person you've been defending all this while, snapped Grina as he took the chance to vent all his indignation that he'd previously suppressed. Grina's words deepened Bradler's frown. President Felix, I understand we had a misunderstanding previously, but hasn't it been resolved? He continued talking to Lin Li with pleading eyes. Although Bradler was convinced that Lin Li's entry into the battle as a high-ranking sanctuary powerhouse wouldn't make much of a difference to the current situation, he was reluctant to let go of any glimmer of hope. After all, he was the king of the Gilded Kingdom. However, Bradler's plea did not waver Lin Li's determination. Haha, I have already given you the solution to overcome that big guy. Don't blame me if you don't want to use that item. What? Everyone who heard Lin Li showed signs of disbelief. Just say the truth if you are unwilling to help us. What do you mean by saying that you have already given us the solution to overcome Wild Whale Rabu? They had witnessed how powerless so many sanctuary powerhouses were against Rabu. How could an item be so powerful to drive the whale away? Haha, don't kid us. Who do you think you are? How could a single item have the power to defeat a wild whale? Why don't you care to base your lies on some credible evidence? Grina sneered at Lin Li right after he heard him. A trace of anger appeared on Bradler's face, as he felt that Lin Li was teasing him. However, he naturally did not want to aggravate Lin Li in the face of the present situation. President Felix, I do not know what item you are speaking about, but it seems to me that you do not have a plan to deal with that whale, said Bradler. At this time, Prince Monterey, who had been standing next to them, showed signs of enlightenment. President Felix, are you referring to that magic scroll you brought to the auction? The only item that Lin Li gave them was that magic scroll that fetched a sky-high price of 400 million gold coins at the auction house. But, although that magic scroll demonstrated a decent power at that time, could it be used to deal with Wild Whale Rabu? Lin Li did not answer Prince Monterey's question. He turned his gaze towards the battlefield in the distance. Since he had said what he should, he was going to leave the rest to them. Prince Monterey's reminder lit up Bradler's face. Great Monarch Hegel, what do you think of trying out President Felix's magic scroll? At the end of the day, that magic scroll was claimed by the Octopus clan with 400 million gold coins. Bradler could only inquire and hope that the Octopus clan would give the magic scroll a try. Grina laughed hysterically when he heard that. King Bradler, you'd better not waste your effort at that master level magic scroll. Even if it is at the peak of the master level, it definitely would not have enough power to deal with that wild whale, said Grina with a tone full of disdain. Grand Duke Vidi once said at the auction that the magic scroll was only at the peak of master level, and for his reputation, the vast majority of people wouldn't think he would speak nonsense. Hence, no one doubted the credibility of the magic scroll. Even if that magic scroll had amazing powers, one certainly could not use it against the sanctuary level wild whale Rabu. The Octopus clan's knowledge of the scroll, however, did not come from Grand Duke Vitus' description. Their knowledge was largely based on their own judgment. Therefore, great monarch Hegel retrieved the magic scroll and flew towards the distant battlefield with the idea of giving it a try. Even though they could see Hegel's intention, none of the people who were staying here believed that a magic scroll like they could really be used to deal with wild whale Rabu. This was especially true for Grina from the Great Shark clan and the ministers from the Gilded Kingdom, who originally despised Lin Li and the Tower of Dusk. No one would have expected wild whale Rabu to be so terrifying despite having read about all of its atrocities in mythical records. Now that they witnessed how none of the many sanctuary powerhouses managed to gain any advantage against wild whale Rabu, they realized how truthful the myths and legends were. Everyone believed that only divines had the ability to subdue such a powerful whale. The words of President Philic from the Tower of Dusk were certainly a joke to them. How could a master-level magic scroll help Grand Duke Viti tide over facing this catastrophe? Could that magical scroll possibly exert the power of the divine? Therefore, Grina continued to caution Bradler as great monarch Hegel proceeded with the magic scroll. King Bradler, are you really going to pin the hopes of the kingdom on that piece of trash? In my opinion, you'd better take advantage of the time to arrange the kingdom's retreat. Now that everyone is stalling that wild whale, this is a great chance for you to ensure the survivors of Four Seasons Island behind you stay alive. That is the very foundation of the Gilded Kingdom, and you shouldn't gamble with that. That's right, Your Majesty. It is better to make use of this opportunity to arrange for the evacuation of as many people from the island as possible. You have to protect the bloodline of the kingdom, persuaded Cantori anxiously as he came over with several ministers from the senatorial families. Cantori would not have wanted to come here if he had known how hopelessly strong wild whale Rabu was. He would have made his escape long ago to flee as far as possible, but since he was here with King Bradler, it would not be nice of him to flee without permission. Hence, he could only try his best to persuade Bradler to give the official order. The ministers who represented the senatorial families immediately took sides with Cantori when they heard his proposal. After all, the foundation of the senatorial families was on Four Seasons Island. If wild whale Rabu were to decide to charge towards the island, none of them would be able to escape. They could only be doomed with the entire kingdom. While persuading Bradler, these people did not forget to condemn Lin Li. If not for his suggestion, they believed King Bradler would have ordered for retreat. Although they wouldn't be able to evacuate many civilians, it would be a crucial time to help their families escape the most danger. Your Majesty, please acknowledge this precarious situation. How could a Mageth scroll have the ability to deal with that wild whale? I think Philic is just trying to take the chance to eradicate us. Please, think about our millions of citizens. This was from Cantori's father, Minister Burgess. He had such a concerned tone, as if he really cared about the safety of the people. Even Minister Karen, who usually held conflicting opinions with Burgess, stepped out to support what had been said. After all, he had to consider his own family, who was still on the island. Your Majesty, how can we leave the fate of our country to an outsider? Regardless of whether that magic scroll is of use, it's always better to be safe than sorry, urged Karen anxiously. These people certainly were speaking with sense. Who knew if the Mageth scroll really had the power to overcome wild whale Rabu? If they were not able to deal with that whale, it would still be a problem for the Gilded Kingdom to solve. Their persuasion made Bradler hesitate. Should he really give up on Four Seasons Island, and the civilians stuck on the island? The order to evacuate could not be issued easily, especially at such a juncture where disaster had struck. After all, it wasn't as simple as herding sheep, because human nature was very difficult to control. The evilness of human nature tended to be revealed during times of crisis and disasters. If the people on Four Seasons Island were to evacuate now, God knew how chaotic the island would become. The chaos alone would be considered a huge disaster. If the magic scroll turned out to be useful and effective in chasing wild whale Rabu away, Bradler would still end up with a huge mess to clear on Four Seasons Island. Not only would it cause the Gilded Kingdom to suffer huge economic losses, there would also be a huge blow to the kingdom's reputation. After all, at this point, the people of the Gilded Kingdom were not the only ones on Four Seasons Island. There were also representatives of other forces. Hence, issuing an order to evacuate was an extremely difficult decision for Bradler. Regardless of what he chose, he would have to face a great risk. However, Bradler's hesitation made the ministers more and more anxious because they didn't want their own families to die together with the Gilded Kingdom. However, Bradler was still the king, after all, and without his orders, they couldn't flee on their own. Okay, the few of you, head back to Four Seasons Island immediately to coordinate the evacuation of the people, but you must make sure that there isn't any unrest or chaos. Bradler hesitated, but eventually decided to evacuate the Gilded Kingdom nationals on Four Seasons Island to preserve some native population. However, just as Bradler issued the order, Great monarch Hegel of the Octopus clan had already flown close to Wild Whale Rabu. Hegel did not slowly unfold the scroll to demonstrate the power of the magic scroll, as Grand Duke Viti had at the auction, because the latter was trying to ensure the safety of the guests at the auction. At this point, there was no need for Hegel to do that. Hence, after flying close to the Wild Whale Rabu, Great Monarch Hegel grasped the magic scroll in his hand and unrolled it without hesitation. As the magic scroll unfolded, time seemed to have stopped along with Evrion's breathing. The magical elements in the space, which were originally invisible and untouchable, suddenly emerged at this moment. It was as if each and every single particle of the magical elements was shining colorfully, lighting up the entire space resplendently. Immediately afterwards, a ray of dazzling light emerged from the magic scroll, making it seem as if Hegel was holding a sun in his hand. From that light, several bizarre and mysterious magic symbols darted out. With the appearance of each magic symbol, there would be a violent tremor in space, as if the magic element's king had appeared. The magic symbols seemed to be leading the magic elements to form a river of elements of different colors that surged towards the sky above Rabu. The elements tumbled in the sky and intertwined above Rabu's head, and a huge phantom was gradually formed from the intertwining rivers of elements. The massive phantom gradually solidified, and seemed as if it was about to reveal its true appearance amidst the mist. This time, the crowd could finally see clearly that the large phantom was actually the image of a majestic mountain. Given the vastness of Anral, there were countless mountains that were even more majestic than the one in the image. However, the crowd felt from the depths of their souls that the mountain seemed out of reach, which was an unprecedented feeling that they had never experienced with other mountains before. Mount Tai. Is that Mount Tai? The holy mountain of the Titans? They couldn't help but be reminded of the explanation on Mount Tai that Grand Duke Viti had given during the auction. Looking at the image of that majestic mountain before them, they were even more convinced of Grand Duke Viti's explanation. Apart from Mount Tai that belonged to the Titans, there was probably no other mountain in Anral that could be compared to it. Of course, these people absolutely couldn't have imagined that Mount Tai, which they thought was the holy mountain of the Titans, was actually just a make-believe existence. The majestic mountain in the image was actually just the Mount Tai that existed in the world Lin Li had belonged to before he transmigrated, and had nothing to do with the Titans. However, it was no wonder that they would associate the image with the Titans. Apart from the explanation that Grand Duke Viti had given previously, another important factor that made them feel that way was, more importantly, the impact that the image had on their emotions. Although the majestic mountain was only hanging above the head of Wild Whale Rabu, and was just an image formed by the condensation of magic elements, everyone couldn't help but feel reverent toward it from the bottom of their heart. At this juncture, Wild Whale Rabu was no longer as comfortable as it had been when dealing with the sanctuary powerhouses just now. It seemed to have also felt threatened by the image above its head. With a deafening roar, its large pair of fleshy wings flapped twice, and its huge, mountain-like body flew upward towards the image of the mountain, as if it really wanted to carry a mountain peak with its own strength. If it was just an ordinary mountain, or even if there were 100 ordinary mountains, Wild Whale Rabu, a demigod, would be able to lift it and flip it over effortlessly. However, the mountain peak created from the condensation of magical elements now was only an external image manifested from the magic scroll. In fact, its interior was composed of brand new rules that did not belong to this world. Wild Whale Rabu could only reach a height of several meters off the surface, after which it could no longer go higher regardless of how loud it roared and how hard it flapped its wings. As the power of the magic scroll in Hegel's hand continued to spread, the image of the majestic mountain became more and more solid, thus oppressing Wild Whale Rabu and causing it to sink. Everyone was stunned by that scene. Even Hegel, who had initially already gained some knowledge of the magic scroll, couldn't quite believe what he was seeing at this moment. The others who thought that the magic scroll was merely at the master level were so shocked that their jaws dropped in surprise. Bradler had already ordered the ministers to go back and organize the evacuation of the kingdom nationals who were on the island. When they saw this scene, they could no longer be bothered to say anything else, and instead got ready to go back and save the elites of their respective families. However, they couldn't move their feet at this moment. Greeno of the giant shark clan was on the verge of vomiting blood. Although Hegel of the octopus clan was using the magic scroll, it was still the work of Greina's enemy. In other words, Lin Li had once again stolen the limelight this time. Can a magic scroll like that really subdue Wild Whale Rabu? Rabu is a powerful enemy that many sanctuary powerhouses can't defeat. Greeno wanted to say something that would affect the confidence and morale of the crowd, but he couldn't bring himself to speak after opening his mouth. Although he hated Lin Li, he could clearly see that the magic scroll seemed to be effective. If he insisted on criticizing it, he would make himself seem like a fool instead. Damn it, how can it be that strong? All Greena could feel was a hot and sharp burning pain on his face. The magic scroll that he had criticized and put down like nothing was actually emitting such a massive power now, proving him wrong through and through. Besides, Lin Li didn't deliberately put him to shame, but rather Grina had brought it upon himself, because he started belittling it out of nowhere, only to end up shooting himself in the foot. At this point, Grina's heart was full of regret and resentment. He regretted running off his mouth anxiously without waiting longer, for if he had waited a few more minutes just now, he wouldn't have been so embarrassed now. At the same time, he had also developed greater hatred for Lin Li, now because he was convinced that Lin Li had to have deliberately plotted this to cause him to make a fool of himself. However, Grina was still somewhat rational enough not to immediately want to settle accounts with Lin Li. On the one hand, they were coping with the calamity only because they could rely on Lin Li's magic scroll. On the other hand, he didn't know if Lin Li had other similar magic scrolls. He didn't think that Lin Li had brought only one magic scroll of such terrifying power with him to the auction. If he had been in Lin Li's shoes, he would have definitely brought more than one such terrifying magic scroll to the auction. Therefore, in his opinion, Lin Li might have a similar magic scroll, or one that was even more powerful than the one that was auctioned off. Even Rabu, the scourge of the endless ocean, couldn't resist the power of the magic scroll easily. No matter how arrogant Grina was, he wasn't that complacent to think that he could measure up to Rabu. Similarly, on the Gilded Kingdom side, Kantori and the several ministers representing the senatorial families were all feeling very conflicted. If they had a choice, they definitely wouldn't be willing to evacuate Four Seasons Island, but the opportunity to transcend the tribulation now was given by the person whom Kantori saw as an enemy and had always despised. Hence, he felt rather uncomfortable about it. If that magic scroll could really help the kingdom overcome this terrifying ordeal, Lin Li would become the great benefactor of the Gilded Kingdom. Not to mention twice, even if Lin Li insulted the Gilded Kingdom 200 more times, the great favor he had done them this time would leave them with no choice but to keep mum and accept it. After all, it was tantamount to rescuing the Gilded Kingdom from the path to extermination, which was a favor that could not be repaid easily. Although Kantori needed not be the one to repay the kindness and favor, Bradler, the king of the Gilded Kingdom, could not ignore it. In other words, even if Kantori and the others were in the right, and wanted to deal with Lin Li in the future, they wouldn't be able to retaliate even if Lin Li made them look particularly bad, as Bradler would 100% have to stand on Lin Li's side in the future. However, if that magic scroll was proven to be useless, and the Gilded Kingdom did not end up owing Lin Li any favors, it would equally be a bad thing for Kantori and the others. If no one could stop Rabu, the Gilded Kingdom would be exterminated, and the senatorial families wouldn't be spared, either. As for the so-called evacuation, it was actually impossible to evacuate everyone without incurring any losses. Preserving some seeds meant that they had to keep a few descendants alive in order to ensure that they did not go extinct. Moreover, without the Gilded Kingdom, it wouldn't be easy for the senatorial families to survive in the endless ocean just with the power of their families. The environment of the endless ocean was closer to the law of the jungle than Anral, and it was all about the survival of the fittest there. After all, the main forces of Anral were humans, but the endless ocean was dominated by the sea clans. At this juncture on the battlefield, the wild whale Rabu had clearly already exerted its full force, as a rich and dense black fog began spreading around, almost engulfing its body, and making it look like a mass of black clouds. However, even so, Rabu still couldn't break free at all under the suppression of the image of the large mountain manifested from the magic scroll. Instead, it was being pressed downwards, almost reaching the bottom of the sea. Great monarch Hegel held the magic scroll, and continuously stimulated its power. Despite having a stern expression on his face, he was actually filled with joy and euphoria. At this moment, he didn't feel the pinch of paying 400 million gold coins for this magic scroll at all. Even if he had to spend 4 billion gold coins on such a powerful magic scroll, he wouldn't hesitate, because it was definitely worth the price. Being a guru of inscription himself, great monarch Hegel could clearly sense that the power of the magic scroll was already reaching the divine smith level, which was the power that only gods could possess. For the Octopus clan, the magic scroll would not only be an offensive magic weapon for launching attacks, but also a guiding light to the realm of divine smith, which couldn't be bought with money. For example, Grand Elder Hayes of the Octopus clan had become a guru of inscription a long time ago, but he had plateaued precisely because he hadn't been able to find his way to the divine smith realm. Hence, he hadn't made any progress for years. However, After obtaining the stone slab that Harquas had brought back, it was as if a brand new door had been opened for him in the field of inscription, allowing him to gain a breakthrough in his comprehension of inscription. The mageth on the slab was just a mageth that Lin Li had created after splashing ink onto Harquas' work. However, this magic scroll was created entirely by Lin Li, and had to be several times more powerful than the mageth on the stone slab that they had gotten previously. Perhaps, with the inspiration of this magic scroll, they might still be able to truly reach the peak of the guru level of inscription, and get a glimpse of the mysteries of the divine smith realm. At this moment, with the pressure of the magic scroll, Rabis' body was completely pressed into the sea. Moreover, there wasn't a single drop of seawater left in the sea, as all the seawater had been squeezed into the surroundings, causing a large and bizarre hole to form. Rabu, which had been suppressed, was still roaring incessantly in exasperation, and constantly stimulating all its power to break free from the suppression of Mount Tai. It didn't expect to fall into such a predicament without even getting to devour any delicacies after awakening this time.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.